It's finally here. New voices, new faces. Welcome to the Pantheon.
Oh, that was... Oh, nice.
What's up, nerd family? Welcome once again to the Poindexter Lounge. My name is Enosh, and it is great to have you with me. Whoop, I'm just knocking everything around here. Like, I literally started and, like, messed up my camera and everything. But hey, we're a professional show, and we're good to go. And that rhymed. What do you know? Hey, welcome to the Poindexter Lounge. My name is Enosh. It's great to have you with me in the lounge tonight. And it should be a hot one. It should be an interesting one, for sure. We're going to cover a lot of things tonight. We're going to cover this story from all angles. We got the story, man. This Rolling Stone article. It's got a lot of people shaken up. It's got a lot of people stirred, as it were, and saying a lot of stuff, talking a lot of stuff, thinking a lot of stuff. And we're going to get to the bottom of it, like what it is. But before we do that, first of all, let me just say welcome to all of you. It's great to have you with me, joining me tonight. And I'm very, very thankful for each and every one of you. We come together because the Poindexter Lounge is a place for nerds. It's a place where you and me and all of us can get together and talk about the things that we love. Things like TV shows, movies, games, sci-fi, fantasy, comic books, superheroes, toys, and so much more. And if those are things that get you excited, then please hit that subscribe button as well as that notification bell and join our growing group of nerds here. That being said, I do want to state off the top. If you're in the chat tonight, let's be respectful of everybody. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of different opinions tonight about the information that we're going to share, which is fine, which is absolutely fine. And I welcome different opinions. And I know that there are people who feel very strongly one way or another. And all I ask of you is, look, if you differ from my opinion on this, that's fine. Let's just make sure that we are actually having a conversation, that we're not talking at each other or like attacking each other or calling each other names or anything like that, because that's not what we're about here. And I understand that this topic is very, very sensitive for some, but we got to stop taking things personally that really have nothing to do with us, in a larger scope. Does that make sense? Because I love people on all sides of this discussion, but this is the place where we can come together and have these types of discussions. And I think that that's important. I think that it's important for us to be able to have grown-up discussions about things that go on, whether just because it's pop culture or entertainment news or whatever, doesn't mean that we can just check all that at the door. And look, there are going to be friends of mine who have other channels or whatever. They're going to have a differing opinion than me. But don't come in here attacking them or thinking that you're doing me a favor by attacking them, because that's not how that works. I have friends who are on the opposite spectrum of where I stand on these subjects and other subjects, and that's okay. It's okay for us to have differing opinions, and we can still be friends, right? So that's all I want to say about that right off the top. First of all, I do want to say thank you to everyone who supports the channel. I always like to make sure that we start off right off the top with that we state that, and thank you guys for being part of the Patreon. And also thank you to all the members. You guys are awesome. You guys keep things going around here, and I greatly appreciate all your support and all that you do. And so thanks to everyone who is a member of the channel. It's super easy. And then, of course, everyone who gives super chats. We will be going over your super chats tonight. As you guys have questions or you guys have things that you want to discuss or talk about, hey, drop a super chat in there and we will get that in there with our guests who are on the panel tonight. And then, of course, we have various ways that you can support the channel right down there. And then don't forget our store. All those links are in the description below. Okay, so I systematically chose who I wanted to talk about that. I had a couple of people that I did invite that couldn't make it tonight, and so that's fine. But tonight we will have Stephen Colbert on. I think that he is a really good voice of reason to talk about and disseminate some of the things that came out in this Rolling Stone article. Also, we will have the Nerd Queens here tonight, so stay tuned for that. But I also have another special guest that I wanted to bring in and talk about some of the analytical stuff, like the issue with the bots and stuff, and we'll get into that. First of all, I want to get to H Barts here with the $10 super chat. Thank you, sir. Says, I want to start this night out by calling you out, Enosh, for being a genuine cool dude. Keep it up, man. That's the kind of energy that we want in this place tonight. Yeah, we don't, I appreciate you, my friend. You're freaking awesome, man. And so yes, we're gonna have a hot one. Tiff, lovely Tiff-tastic is in the chat tonight. So thank you, babe. Appreciate. I'm probably not gonna get to everybody in here because you guys came in hot, and yeah, you guys are in here. So thank you to everyone who is in the chat. I do appreciate you all, and we will have these discussions as we go forward tonight. But thank you guys for your support. Tiffany says she has a question. She says, how come I don't have a wrench with my name anymore? Oh, well, you know what? I don't know, but we can fix that real quick. That doesn't make sense to me. Unless you got on Stella's bad side. I don't know. No, she can't. Well, she can't take that way. But I'm just messing. No, let me see here. Tiff, I will make sure you should have a wrench, babe. So I don't know. Hold on a second. Maybe it's just been a while since you've been here. I don't know. I am fixing that right now. You are now a moderator, babe. Like, if Tiffany's not a moderator, I don't know who should be a moderator, right? Because she owns half the channel, so well, she owns all the channel. She named the freaking channel, for God's sake. So, and yes, Scotty, I got her a wrench, man. I got her a wrench. We got her taken care of. So I just want to start this conversation off with saying this. Look, we're gonna have people on tonight who they're strictly I don't want to speak for them because I want Scotty to be able to state his opinion, like why he's here and whatnot. But I will start off with saying that, like, look, not everybody is a Snyder fan, right? And that's okay. That's okay. What I love about this, though, is, like, truth is truth, regardless if you're a Snyder fan or not. And I think that it's important that we don't be delusional and just act like, well, because we like something, that everything that surrounds that is always going to be right, or everybody else is going to be wrong. So for anyone thinking that, well, oh, here goes Enosh, like I already had somebody on Twitter like kind of call me out because they didn't like I don't think they liked the thumbnail that I made. But I didn't change my opinion. I don't understand this idea that I changed my opinion somehow of these things. We haven't talked a lot about Snyder stuff because there hasn't been a lot to talk about. We've talked about, Rebel Moon when there's been information that comes out on that. We talk about, stuff as it comes up about various topics. But I think people think sometimes maybe now, for some reason, that because I haven't done all this exclusive, Zack Snyder content, that somehow like Enosh has backed off of this. Enosh didn't back off of this. I don't know where that idea comes from, because that's not the truth at all. I still very much so believe the way that I did a year ago, 2 years ago, when, beyond that, when we were fighting for the Snyder cut and all those things. Everybody doesn't share that same thing. Everybody's not into the same stuff that I'm into. That's the great thing about the lounge, is that it's for people who like various things, different things, and not everybody's thing is DC heroes or whatever. Some people are here for Star Wars content. Some people are here for various things, based on those opinions. So don't get all bent out of shape about that, right? But like, as far as, to me, and listen, I understand that there are some people who they now all of a sudden they have an issue with Ray Fisher. I don't. Okay, I don't have an issue with Ray Fisher because I've talked to the man. I've we've had him on here. We've corresponded outside of that, and I believe him, and I don't think that I don't have an issue with the things he's saying. So it's still very much fresh to me, and I still believe in what we've talked about for a very, very long time, and I still stand with Ray Fisher on the things that happened regarding Justice League and around that and around Warner Brothers and stuff. And I'm so glad that we have a new regime in at Warner Brothers who hopefully starts making good decisions, regarding these characters that I love. Now, does that mean that Zack Snyder has to be in control of all of them for me to be happy? No, it doesn't. That's not what it means for me. That may be what it means for you, that you won't be happy until Zack Snyder is in charge of those things. I will tell you from my personal feeling, though, that I think you're going to be very, very disappointed going forward. If that is like your only way to be happy regarding the subject, you're going to be very upset, because I don't think that we're going to see like Zack Snyder. Look, I wish that I was wrong. I would hope to be wrong. I wish that I could be wrong about this. I would love nothing more than Zack Snyder to come back and like helm the whole thing, because I like his take on these heroes, right? I like his take on these movies. But it's not all about me either. And it's not all about just what I want. And I don't even think that Zack just wants to come in and take control over that. He had a 5-movie arc that he was going to do, and then he was going to back off from it. And, this idea that like we won't be happy until Zack controls the whole thing. I don't think that that's realistic. And I don't think that's healthy. And I think that people have allowed this to consume them to the point where they've lost friends, they've treated people horribly, they've come across as being, just bad people. And I've acknowledged this, that there is a side to the Snyder fandom that does not adhere to positive ways of dealing with stuff. Can I just put it that way? They don't always appeal to the positive way of handling differences of opinions or whatever. A lot of people dealing in a lot of absolutes and pulling ideas from crazy places. And it's just not a good place to be. It's not a good place to come from. And I think that we have to hear each other out, and that's what we're hopefully going to do tonight. And so, yeah, I just wanted to make sure people know, like, this is where I stand. I still feel the same way that I did. I'm just respectful of people's opinions, right? And so we're going to talk about this from a few different angles. And so I love the panel that we have tonight. It's a smaller panel. It's not this big panel. We shouldn't be having a bunch of people talking over each other and everything. But yes, we do have Stephen Colbert here to talk about, because he's a writer. He understands this stuff when it comes to to articles and how they go together. And he's been around for a long time in the community, and he understands the things that have led up to this. Obviously, we have the Nerd Queens, man, who've been around, with the fandom and are obviously not bots. I'm not a bot. If you support Zack Snyder and you're not a bot, hey, welcome. But speaking of bots, we're also going to talk about what bots are, how bots are used. And we, of course, to do that, have our very own, my technical producer extraordinaire, savior of the channel on many occasions, because we wouldn't be here without Scotty. To be honest with you, we would not be here without Scotty. Scotty has single-handedly saved the lounge on many an occasion, and so we're happy for that. So I just wanted to say that. Also, we do have a giveaway coming up, but that's beyond the point. we'll give that away some point this week. And all you got to do is join up with all the stuff. So there we go. That's all down. Here we go. We're going to jump right in. First of all, we do have a Cylon Scotty. What's going on, Scotty?
Hey, how's it going?
Good to see you, my friend.
You too.
It's been an interesting couple of days.
Sure. It only came on my radar last night, but
yeah. And then also the man with the greatest looking camera, I think, on streaming, Stephen Colbert, and a great beard to match. So
yeah, they go together. It doesn't look as good without the camera. So
that's true. That's true. I just love the blurriness, the crystal clear focus on your face, and you look great. So,
thank you.
Welcome, gentlemen. The Nerd Queens will be joining us a little bit later, but I think it's a good time to jump in. Scotty, I want to start with you.
Mm-hmm.
You tell everybody what it is you do, like how you want to approach this, and like your take on some of the stuff that you've seen for those of you who don't know, by the way, Rolling Stone magazine there was a pretty big article came out yesterday, pretty scathing towards Zack Snyder, and the fandom talked a lot about how made claims that the release the Snyder Cut movement basically started out of just bots, fake accounts or whatever, trying to push this narrative. Obviously, restore the SnyderVerse and release the Snyder Cut has trended forever, and so we want to talk about that tonight. That's one angle that we want to talk about. Like, is that a thing? Are there bots going on? The article says some things about, there was obviously more bots at this time, being used by this, by that. But Scotty has a great handle on that. And so, Scotty, I want to turn that over to you and let you speak to that.
Sure. Thanks for having me on. I don't think I've given this kind of introduction, but I'll just say it since it's like relevant tonight. But professionally, I actually write machine learning models that teach robots how to orchestrate security in large clusters like Kubernetes and AWS and things like that. And I made my money for 6 years before I had that job writing Twitter bots. So that's what I have done. That's what I do. And the reason why I told Enosh I didn't really want to come on, but this is something that's come up a lot. And some of you even in chat who have channels, when you've like crossed over this line of like trying to parse data and what it means, I have let you know what I think about it. Even Enosh, I've done that to Enosh. I've said, hey, that's not what this means. So I just wanted to come on and speak to that piece. I'm not a Snyder hater, but I'm also not a Snyder supporter. I'm not like a big fan. I like the Snyder Cut enough, but I'm here strictly to talk about this kind of stuff. And then there's two things I also want to address from chat. I do agree with Brian that this issue isn't about bots. However, Rolling Stone started it by reaching out to a couple data analytics companies to analyze the bots. So that's where this article started, from what I'm reading in Tatiana's own words. So that's why I'm speaking to that piece. I don't have anything to say about the quotes attributed to Snyder or anything like that. No. And then the other thing that I want to say is that I've seen a lot of hate around this reporter in this article. And even though I don't think they did a very good job here, I don't think we should be hating this person. The reason why is because this person writes entertainment news, they write celebrity news, and they usually do a pretty good job. Most journalists suck at tech writing. It's not their expertise. They don't know how to do the data. They reach out to an expert. The expert gives an answer. They translate that answer how best they know, and then they report it to mixed results. And I believe in this case, there's a way to parse out this situation and show that that's what happened. But like, if I was in a room with Tatiana, I wouldn't be like, you suck and you did a terrible thing and this is a hit piece. I would say, you should have consulted with a technical writer at the Rolling Stone before you publish this article. And it's just a professional way to address it. I
want to point out too, like Scotty mentioned, Scotty has corrected me many times on different things regarding information or how things work on different things. And honestly, guys, I respect Scotty so much as far as like his expertise of what he does. That, I mean, there's only a few people that I will listen to, like to take counsel from, you know, that I trust, that I feel like have my best interests at heart and really want the best for me. Scotty is one of those people. That Scotty has my ear when it comes to things, you know. Scotty's messaged me before and said, "Hey, Enash, you're talking about this, you're doing this. Hey, be careful what you're doing, you know, or, you know, make sure that you know what you're talking about in this case or that case." And so I really appreciate that, Scotty, in a lot of ways.
Thanks,
more ways than you know. So
I try not to be too crass, but I am a crass person by nature, by the way. So, but yeah, let's jump into some of this data. I've been thinking about how I'm going to describe it. I'm going to try to keep it succinct and simple. I don't need to give like a data science course, but there's two like aspects here. First of all, Rolling Stone reaches out to two different firms, QFID and Graphica. I was not familiar with QFID, but I spent about 2 hours today reading up on them and what they do. My guess, and this is my guess is that QFID probably is the one, and that's the Q5 ID, but you pronounce it QFID. My guess is that a lot of these general statements are from them, and the data are from Graphica. And this is a pretty common thing. Like probably Rolling Stone reached out because QFID actually doesn't do this. They do authentication technologies and finding missing people and things like that. That's actually what they do. So they certainly have some expertise in that house, but they don't have at least published to the public, which it's common for these companies to only advertise these kinds of services only to corporations, and they are expensive. But I don't see that from their side or on their blog. So I think that the writer, and this is another thing where I say like journalists that aren't technical journalists will do this often. They'll do a bunch of Google searches, find a few names, and then reach out to those companies. But I am very familiar with Graphica, and I 100% believe the data that Graphica has produced. But my issue is that I've seen the reports specifically for these kinds of things from Graphica, and the top 3 pages were not included in this article 100%. And that's what I wanted to address. So for instance, when they bring up the number 13%, I believe that number. It's probably accurate. And it's probably accurate within like a plus or minus 2%, which is usually the error rate. And I'll go into a little in a second, like how bots are created and what that actually is. But that number is probably accurate. But my issue is that in the article, they say, well, you know, this is, you know, in a separate statement. So here's 13%. I think that's coming from Graphica. The other part is, oh, well, that's up from the, you know, 3 to 5% that we usually see for these kinds of things. Well, yeah. That was really interesting to me because the 13% number is one that's really common to me. Because the uptick in bots since COVID and really since the 2016 election was 11%. So the amount of bots for a given trend were up 11%. So is that number representational when they're comparing it and saying it's up from that? Is that a number that is in a trend in the same time frame that the Snyder bots were trending? Or are they comparing that to the general number that we all accepted in 2019? And the fact that they don't clarify that is really telling, because I will tell you 100% that the first page on the report that you get from Graphica, you spend about $100,000 for that report. And when you get it, the top page is trend leveling. And it will say, here is the thing that we analyzed, and here is comparing it to other trends at the same time and similar topics. So for instance, it would be like, you know, a Marvel movie out at the same time trending, right? How many bots were there for that compared to this, right? But I think what they did is they took the general number that we knew before, which was 3 to 5%. That's a known number. And that was in 2019, like from 2017 to 2019. And I think they said, okay, when we analyzed the bot, 13% of this was, you know, bots. And our experts say that the normal number is 3 to 5%. Mm-hmm. When, for what, under what trending, at what time frame, and what specifically. And I 100% guarantee that Graphica provided that information. So the fact that it was redacted or like removed, right, is like a little suspicious. But again, I don't think that this was a malicious thing on Tatiana's part. I think that it was, again, a journalist who's not a tech journalist trying to understand tech data. And she was probably looking at a huge report, 30 pages or more long, and trying to pull out of that what was useful to her. And it's a common thing. So again, like, we should stop the hate on her for that reason. Now, the other issue is in the article is, and actually the part of really great journalism is in a part in the article, and I don't have it in front of me, but there's a part in the article that they mentioned tracking one of the bot campaigns to an ad agency that was to drive like traffic to websites, which, by the way, that's the whole point of Twitter bots. It's to latch onto a trend and then use that to redirect people to other places. That's 100% of the reason for them to exist, and that has sort of changed over time, like exactly how you do that, exactly how you make your money. But yeah, like when they include that in the article, it's like, that's really funny, because like they're actually just like sort of revealing there like really what the agenda here is. There certainly was probably people in the Snyder movement that made bots. I would completely accept that. However, bots that get created like this, like aren't from fans. They aren't from people who care at all about what the trend is. They just will go to Google Trends. They will see certain topics that start trending. And then they will write bots and they will write code to start taking advantage and leeching off of that emerging population of people. That's the whole point of them. During my time of writing, Twitter bots, I mean, I did everything from political issues in Uganda to, a high school who had a bake sale and, everybody got poisoned, right? Like food poison. Like, I mean, that's a literal situation. And you write, I say go to Google Trends, but if you're in the business of writing bots, you actually write a lot of code yourself that will scrape in information from different places and on a daily basis tell you, what are the things that are trending and what are some of the sentiments. Sentiment processing is something that we can offload to AI using machine learning, and it's definitely is what's used here. So the whole concept that, again, like the data that came back, 13% of these bots, probably true. The percentage of those bots that were from the Snyder movement or hired by people in the Snyder movement or Snyder himself or contracted to a third-party company, that's the data that would be useful, and it's missing from this article. So to me, it's a moot point. And if you take a look at the larger trend currently right now is an uptick of 11%. So for any given trend, you can actually expect a 12 or 13% amount of those, people commenting to be bots for everything that's trending anyway, everything that's being targeted. So yeah, I mean, like that's really my spiel. And again, like I'm gonna like avoid like translating this on like a pro or anti-Snyder. Is it possible that Snyder did this? It's possible. It's super cheap. Like when I was writing bots, I was making about $500 a week. You don't get rich off of it. You scrape out a lot of data. Most of your campaigns fail and produce nothing, right? And then you move on. And that's actually what's kind of interesting to me is when you hire, and this is one thing that when I was looking at the data that was provided, you can actually go and find parts of this report from other people's articles from Graphica's report. Nothing too substantial, but when you take a look at it, something really struck me, which is, and this is like the final thing I'll say, and then I'll let Stephen go. I'm sorry to dominate so much, Stephen.
This is awesome.
Okay. That's why I had him here.
So when you go and you pay for bots, what you're going to see is an uptick in activity, and it will go over a period of time. Usually you will pay for bots over like a week to a month. And it'll be in those kind of like blocks, like 7 days, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, or a month, right? Most campaigns last usually a week. That's usually the longest that you will keep it running. And so when you pay for them, so when you're a company, you pay for something. So this isn't something that's trending. This isn't something that someone's trying to take advantage of. This is, I'm saying, in the instance of a company saying, we want to promote something, we're going to buy some bots. You'll see this sort of curve. But the issue that I have with it is that the bot activity reported by Graphica is as consistent as the length of it trending on Google Trends. So instead of it like coming up and after a week it's out, it's the entire time the Google Trends had it in a top 500. Those bots are active according to Graphica. And to me, that looks more to me like this is a trend campaign from a group that writes Twitter bots that doesn't care about Snyder, and they are going to latch onto anything for as long as it's trending. And then when it stops trending, they remove the bots and move it to something else, right? And you'll have multiple trends that you'll be attacking at the same time. So just looking at that data tells me that that is not a company that hired this and kept this going. This, to me, this is a group or many groups like attaching to the trend, and the data sort of pans that out. What's happened here is I think Tatiana, I think thought she had a scoop and thought she knew how to translate this. And again, they should have gotten, other people to come in and consult, and they would have told them exactly what I just told you. And that's actually part of my professional job, is people will bring me into these things and say, how does this work? Right. And I keep getting work. So it means that I must be right about a few things. I think she kind of took that. She goes, oh, there's this uptick. Oh, that's more than this. Oh, this must have been how this occurred. And they start taking data and transposing it. And it's very much the same way that you look into the sky and you're sure that Jesus is in the cloud, but it's literally it's the same process, but it's
or a
potato. Really just your mind, creating it based on what you want to see or whatever. And it's the same kind of issue here. So again, my main points here is that you should trust this data. It has been misinterpreted. I do not believe it was misinterpreted maliciously, although I don't have any data either way. I just wouldn't jump to that conclusion, because I just see this all too often as just journalists that suck at parsing tech data. And also, given that those 13%, are Snyder bots, we can completely, accept that number. That doesn't mean that was from the Snyder movement, from Snyder himself, or any other marketing company around it. It is, if you look at the data and the trend over time, it is clear to me that at the very least that I would, if you were asking me, you must give me your opinion here, I would say this was absolutely trend warriors scraping the trends, and not a significant amount of corporations buying bots. Mm-hmm. Also, the last thing that I'll note too is that the process of, because this came up too with the Oscar stuff, this isn't a straw poll. And even when you do polls like that, even with the Oscars, there actually are laws around it. There's actually legal guidelines that you have to follow when you do a competition like that. Even though no one's winning anything, no one's winning any money. If you have some sort of official sort of poll, there actually is legal and compliance that comes in. This came up when people were talking about that, which is it is really easy for companies to find which are bots and which are not. Mostly because the way they're created, these are not created by hand. This isn't somebody that's going through and typing these things out. You are all used to interacting with the internet through a series of button clicks and thumb taps. But the reality is that everything in the internet comes down to really two things, which is get, post, and request. What you do is you set up a huge infrastructure that will automatically make accounts. And then you set up code that will time out their replies so that they're not all dumping at once and things like that. Mm-hmm. But the first thing that you have to do to start hitting that is become a developer, get a developer with Twitter, which is trivial, but it's also marked. So if you want to start using this data and interacting with it at the large scale that bots must, you can track all these users that are made through the APIs and the developer accounts that originated them. So it's actually very easy to do that. And then the second thing is that machine learning has gotten very good at scraping language sentiment and common things, because even no matter how good your bot is, it's going to repeat language, it's going to repeat sentiment, it's going to, you won't see it all at once because it's cleverly timed usually. But as far as ferreting it out, that stuff is trivial. So when they look for bots and they say it's 13%, that's pretty close to the truth. There'll be some things they don't catch. There'll be things they do catch that weren't, actually a bot. But generally speaking, the technology and the techniques are really, really good. And Twitter actually capitulates with people very well. So when they hire a company to do this sort of thing, Twitter actually grants them a further level of developer access to get that kind of data. And there's a whole thing around it. There's a whole infrastructure. It's a whole discipline. So yeah, trust data. Don't hate this author. I agree with Brian that this isn't all about bots, but it's I think it's a worthwhile moment to say, look, let's just check ourselves. There's a lot of things I'm not an expert on that you all talk about. And when that happens, I shut the hell up and I listen to you, And, you know, because everybody has their expertise. So this isn't
Yeah.
something that I would expect people to just be able to pick out and move forward with. And that's why I wanted to speak today, you know, but it's worth, you know, like when you run into something where you're not an expert, you don't really understand, you know, you read this article, and then that's the problem, is that you're going to take from it what you will. If you hate Snyder, this article is going to be like music to your ears. If you love Snyder, then this article is a hit piece, right? It's how you're translating it based on where you're coming from. But the reality is this data is not subjective, and it's just been mischaracterized.
Yeah. Yeah. And look, that's the thing, you know, this type of stuff exists. I think that we have to be realistic because when I hear people say, well, no, you know, there were no bots, you know, it's all people. Look, we get it. Like, I'm not a bot, right? If you're not a bot, make that known, right? That's what we can do in the trenches, right? Is to make it known, look, I'm not a bot. I love this stuff. I supported this stuff. I'm not a bot. You know, obviously I like what, where did it go? Yes, Daniel here says, whoops, if I can get it up. Daniel says, yes, bots made all those donations to AFSP too. So obviously, look, I understand that
Computer,
people are
turn on office.
I understand that people are upset because
Computer set office to purple.
I understand that that this is something that those of us who've been around, who supported this with our time, our money, our efforts, so many people who have volunteered their time to help in a positive way the movement, not because they were trying to get ahead, not because they were trying to bolster, you know, a YouTube channel. Most people don't even have YouTube channels or you know, a podcast or something that they were supporting. They literally just joined the fight because they wanted to do something positive, and they felt that this was a positive thing to support AFSP and organize some of that stuff. And, you know, obviously you're real. You know you're real. If you know something, it doesn't matter if you know who you are and what you did, it doesn't matter what somebody else did. It doesn't matter how somebody else says. You know the truth for you. But we know that there are people who do crazy things. And like, I find it interesting. Scotty says, you know, like even, not even, that this is like, you know, a bunch of crazy Snyder fans, trying to do this, but you know, it's literally people on the internet trying to latch on to something. Now, could there have been, and probably are, I mean, people who were trying in maybe their way, thinking that they were doing something positive, right? To get attention to it or whatever. You know, I can't judge their motives. I don't like it. I don't like the idea that something fake, you know, is a thing, you know, that like somehow if we fake the numbers or fudge the numbers, like we'll get somebody's attention or we'll get something like, I think that takes away from our purpose and our goal. That if we were really here to see Zack Snyder's vision, you know, like we did, being the Snyder Cut, and we were here to support AFSP and to try to pay homage to the memory of Zack Snyder's daughter, then it takes away from that for anybody who was trying to pad those numbers or trying to make it look like something that it wasn't, you know. But I find what you said, Scotty, very, very interesting in the fact that it's not necessarily just that.
Yeah, there's a lot going on, you know.
Yeah. So, but I don't know, Stephen. What do you think, man? You see that you work in this space, and you know, I know a lot of people are pissed off right now, Tatiana, and they're looking for, we've been attacked like this, right? We've seen hit pieces, we've seen, you know, things as a fandom, and the fandom is split and gone in different directions, and not everybody agrees to the same thing. There's people who are mad at these people, you know, and whatnot, and they can't all agree on the same thing, even though we're supposed to be under this same banner of being, you know, Snyder fans or whatever. And it's all over the place right now. But what do you think hearing this?
Yeah, I think first of all, yeah, like you said, I am a journalist, so I write a lot about the not as much recently, but wrote a lot of coverage of the Snyder Cut, including stuff about the production of Justice League leading up to its release. I was on your show before and kind of gave a long rundown of my my experience. So anyone that watched that might be a little bit familiar.
And you also write for Screen Rant.
Right.
So,
yeah.
Yep.
And I just wrote an article this afternoon, was published, that basically addressed a lot of this. Ironically, it wasn't actually initially. It was concepted before that article even hit, but it was about the digital release and the demand and the kind of what this means for kind of this whole topic. And this stuff kind of all ended up slotting in there because there's a question of what does the data mean, and what is that? And there's a lot of, especially because HBO Max hasn't released official data. There's a lot of debate over, was it a success, was it a failure, and now we're talking, is the fandom real thing? Were the campaigns real? Were the campaigns a failure? And that's a thing that was going on from the very beginning. Very early on, the first articles were saying like, oh, it's just a handful of angry fans that are taking advantage of social media and goosing trend numbers and spamming hashtags. And so, I think it's really interesting, and hopefully, I put myself on mute because I have a tendency to cut in and talk too long. But I thought all that about the bots was absolutely fascinating, and I hope that we provide a really good, well-rounded discussion since I come from the other side of the ball a little bit. Although I think that, Scotty, you gave a really great explanation sort of the journalist side and where the struggle is there. I deal with a lot of data for different things. I do a lot of like really in-depth Rotten Tomatoes breakdowns, not just like the score, but I mean, I break down all the data. There's a lot of data available. There's total reviews, there's mixed reviews, audience reviews, the rate they come in, the rate it changes, how far it's going to drop, all sorts of stuff. And not that is remotely the same, but just to say that the act of having to deal with all of that stuff, or box office data, or really anything in the industry, there's so much specific knowledge that's required. And in film journalism specific, it's really interesting because really you're talking like film journalism, you've got art, you've got criticism of art and understanding of art. You've got business because you're talking box office, you're talking budgets, you're talking studios and how they behave and how they interact. And then you're talking like marketing and PR. So there's all these different sides of the coin. You're also talking about filmmaking techniques, and those are all three drastically different areas. But you don't have film journalists, or sometimes you do, but for the most part, everyone's kind of a generalist. You don't have somebody who specializes in movie making and focuses on how this was made, what was the technique, what was going on behind that. In the same way that someone that knows that might not necessarily be the most adept at just because they can put together a good shot doesn't mean they can interpret the subtext of the script, or just because they know how to like what looks good and what the secret meaning is behind it doesn't mean that they understand what box office behavior means. And so you get, as Scotty said, people that will that aren't always experts with the data, and it doesn't always end up being completely parsed out in the end. And it's really, really easy to, I think one of the biggest things with the Snyder Cut thing specifically, but you see it all across the internet, I mean, really across every area of society, is fundamentally, like I think it comes from we don't have a great ability to remember a lot of details about a lot of people. And so we group people, and we like to categorize and label and group things so that we can easily understand and track. The problem is you'll do something like, say, quote unquote Snyder fans, or quote unquote journalists, or quote unquote Hollywood execs, or whatever. And that is now one type of person that you just is a hat that you put on whoever fits in that category, and then you treat them all as if it's the same person. Right. That's part of the reason, like even though I am a Snyder fan, I like his movies. I co-host a podcast that is dedicated to his movies. I write a lot about a lot of his stuff, and am a big supporter of the Snyder Cut. But also the whole concept of fandom has been something that I'm a little bit repelled by. Not because it's not repelled like it's like necessarily a turnoff. I don't necessarily get it, or doesn't appeal to me, because I'm not someone who, I don't like categorizing people in that way, but I also don't like being categorized in that way.
Sure.
So like I interact with Snyder fans, I like Snyder's content and all that stuff, but like I don't like considering myself a Snyder fan, because not only do I don't want to don't like that as a label that's cross applied, but also there are activities that have happened with whatever portion of the fan base you want to assume it is that I don't want to be associated with. And so I say, you know what, I write about this stuff. It's not like I just want to be distant from it. That doesn't mean I don't like it. It just means that for the sake of kind of my engagement level with it, that's where I stand. But that's a really interesting thing about like the overall approach of this piece. I think that there's a few things going on. One is the way that it's written, but also you look at kind of what is quoted in the piece and what is cited in the piece as far as the data, who was contacted, what they talked about, what did they talk about, and the sort of fundamental purpose of it is a labeling and categorizing thing. I have a big background in argumentation and debate, and so I kind of view a lot of things through that lens in the sense that I look at, okay, what is the claim here? What would be necessary to support that? What would be necessary to debunk it? What is the strategy at play? I have a marketing and PR background also, so that ties into that type of thinking a lot. And so you look at from the title to the very beginning of this article, it's all very much the intent is to categorize a group of people as bots or enabled by bots or supported by bots, which undermines the legitimacy of what they were doing. Yeah. And then it also calls into question motive. What was Snyder's motive behind this? He was being petty. He wanted revenge. He wanted all of these things. And so those are all categorizations that it's applying to groups of people and individuals and trying to draw a connection between them to come to an outcome. And I think one of the most important things, and this is what I learned writing about the Justice League the first time around, was I was a relatively new writer at the time, and there was also anyone who followed the news at the time remembers that Snyder stepped down, Whedon came in, and the studio was making claims about, oh, Whedon was picked by Snyder, and we're adhering to the same tone, and all of these things. Yeah. And so it was really easy to just kind of assume that was the case. A lot of the stuff hadn't come out yet. A lot of people were supporting, oh, this is just going to be Snyder's vision. Also, he had to step down because of a family tragedy. And so in that context at the time, it was really hard to be like, to assume that this would happen in the wake of a family tragedy, but also to assume that he wanted to come back or even have anything to do with it. The last statement he made, he said something like, people are going to say what they do, and I don't even really care at this point. I got to take care of my family. And so there was very much online a sentiment of like, well, don't drag him into this. He wants the distance. And that changed over time. But to understand the context of what was occurring as that developed, that's really important. And so I wrote a lot of pieces. I read into the DGA, Directors Guild guidelines, and how those worked and how that must have applied in this case. I researched other movies where there were rewrites and reshoots and looked at the Writers Guild standards to figure out who's credited when, because Whedon got a writer's credit but not a director's credit, and what's involved there. And I had all the reasons in my head very clearly as to why this was going to be Snyder's movie, and Whedon was just helping to finish it up. And that looks really naive in retrospect, and it was, but the important part to note is that I did a lot of work and a lot of sort of analysis and learning about how I thought things worked in order to support that opinion. And it ended up being about as wrong as I've ever been about anything. So after that, I thought, okay, first of all, I need to understand how these things work more before I dive into it again. Was not the right person to be having an expert opinion on these things. And second of all, it's important to have a process for thinking. Because we are all, as Scotty was saying, we're all prone to confirmation bias. We love confirmation bias, and it's really easy to say, "Oh, well, there's A and B, and we can connect them, and boom, there's your malicious proof right there." And the fact of the matter is, like, if you think of your brain like a courtroom, like you can't be the judge and the prosecution and like consider that a fair trial. And so as you're going to approach anything like this, you have to incorporate some sort of a standard of proof for yourself to ensure you're not falling victim to confirmation bias. So how does that apply to all of this? Well, when it comes to like the reason that it was written or Tatiana's motivation, that I don't know if that's entirely knowable. I think there's a lot of different reasons behind it. I would agree with both of you that the response should not be to give her any grief about it at all. It isn't necessarily going to be productive, but B, it's also just playing into the exact same way that the fandom is characterized in the article. So if someone's going to say they're toxic and they dogpile people on social media, the way that you prove that that's not true is not by dogpiling people on social media and being like, we don't dogpile people on social media, because that's really, really counterproductive. But so I think that's but one of the first big points, though, is you look at what is being quoted and what is being cited. Is there are multiple people cited who, some of them I think it specifies are former WAB employees. Some of this is stuff that we've heard before, unwatchable cut, etc. They cite the social media analysis report, which I think we just had a great breakdown in, so I don't need to add my non-expert journalistic opinion into that. But I will note, I think it was interesting that the article cited that the report is dated April of 2021, which is after the movie came out. So there was something going on at Warner Media after the movie came out that, or maybe that was just when it was finished. Maybe it was started before then. But the point is that around the time of the movie coming out, Warner Media wanted to know what's the authenticity of this campaign. That this was not done or completed before the movie was completed. And so therefore it wasn't a decision as to whether or not to greenlight it. So I don't know exactly what that means, if it means they were looking at whether or not to continue or how to engage with them, or maybe it was a part of the social media ad report that like the homebrew marketing team put together. I don't know. But I think that date is really important. The other thing that was interesting was I think from QFID, I think they said, the Chief Information Officer, Becky Wanta, the information about how the bots work and everything is very, very important, but also, at least from a journalist, the way I understand things is you always have to look at things definitionally. People love to use different words for different things. This was a big deal with the Snyder Cut for like, what does exist mean? Whoever thought that was going to be a big deal? But without a unified agreement on what the word exist means, how can you agree on whether or not the Snyder Cut exists? Do you mean the footage exists? Do you mean it's sitting 100% complete on a Blu-ray somewhere ready to be watched? And people were saying it doesn't exist. They didn't mean it wasn't shot. We all knew it was shot. There were people saying it does exist, and they meant that it was done, and they were wrong too. But a lot of the time, there were people that agreed on what the general state is, and they just disagreed on how it should be referred to, in order to, I guess, kind of frame the discussion in terms of, saying it's not, doesn't exist is seen as a negative.
That's the thing that like many YouTubers came under attack for, and writers came under, I've had a lot of people even come at me this week because John Campea stopped in, last week and supported the channel. And I had a lot of people saying, how in the world can you say that John Campea is any good at all when John Campea was out here saying that the Snyder Cut doesn't exist and blah, blah, blah. And like, I even put him in the video to my song that I did about, the associate producer song, like as a point, because like there were all these people saying, look, it doesn't exist. And they were to varying degrees, right? It wasn't just, it doesn't exist. There were some people who were just like, it doesn't exist in any form. Zack wouldn't have had access to it. And that's a whole other now debate with what's being talked about in this article about, him holding information or holding the drives or whatever with stuff. And those are conversations we can have, right? But the thing is that, in the end, like you said, like when John Campea said it doesn't exist, he kept talking about there's a working cut, there's this kind of cut, there's that kind of cut. It's not, it wasn't ready to go. And I think like we put in our head was like, well, Zack said it was good. Zack said that his cut was done and good, but obviously there was more that had to be done because they had to give him more money to finish it.
Right. And I came under fire for pointing that out too, even though I was a big supporter. My angle was there is the footage is shot and some of the post-production is done, and the plan, like they know what needs to be done to finish it. They were partway into post-production. So the question is not, does it exist? Does it not exist? Let's even say it doesn't exist. That's really not essential to the question. What is essential to the question is, can it be monetized? And
Yeah.
if it can it be monetized to a greater extent than it will cost to finish it?
Right.
And that's what matters. And so my angle was always, well, look, it should take 40 million or so to complete, and it being more than that. And I said, but if you look at Blu-ray sales and director's cut sales and stuff like that historically, it's not out of line with what this would need to make in order to be justifiable. But I was saying that it was a little bit of a tangent. I started talking about whether or not it exists, but just as a exclamation point, sort of to the importance of definitions. And I know this isn't coming from the actual report or like what that 13% is comprised of, but QFID's chief information officer gave a quote. She said that there's no question that bots were involved. But then the next paragraph is really interesting to me because it says, Wanta explains there are certain patterns that bots give off that we saw here. And so then she says, here's kind of how we established what is and what isn't a bot. And she says they arrive at almost the same time in huge numbers. And many times the origin of thousands or even millions of messages can be traced to a single source or two. Sometimes they can be traced to unusual servers, and their content will be precisely similar. Well, now look at any Snyder Cut trend campaign and look at, there'd be a poster or something that would go around and they'd say, everybody, nobody tweet until precisely this time. And here is the message you're going to tweet. Is this, so you have people who have, they're using form messages. They're scheduling, sometimes people are scheduling dozens of tweets to go out from their account ahead of time. Mm-hmm. And they were all incredibly similar. They were either a rote message or lots of people would simply just quote tweet or just tweet something, including only the hashtag, which is all, in my mind, but also per this definition here, consistent with bot behavior. Now, I don't want to overstep and oversimplify. I know there's more to that, so I don't know if Scotty needs to correct or contradict that. But I do think that that's an interesting bit of the analysis too, that the fans kind of lended themselves to appearing like bots in the way that they conducted themselves.
Yeah, I wanted to address a couple of things. I'll address that one first. I mean, like, I think generally you're right on that. There are some ways that they can parse out sort of rote messages that are similar, to each other. That's not the only metric that bots display, but certainly that accounts for the error rate, right? So when we talk about the plus or minus 2%, that should fall within that. That being said, like when they pointed with what you just said, where like they're saying, hey, like we can track the origins and stuff to these things. I addressed that kind of earlier in the first thing, where a lot of these they have to come from a developer account. Initially, they have to be attached to a developer account at some point in order to hit the Twitter API to do it programmatically. So that's what they mean when they say they can trace origins. Usually it's looking at that. The second thing is the device fingerprint. So if I send a tweet from my phone, there's actually a header. It's not data that you all see because all you see is the text you write out and you hit send. But if you're on Twitter's side, or if you're on the companies doing the analytics here on that side, you'll see something that's called a header. And it's a sort of packet of information that precedes the actual text, what we call the body of the message. And that header will actually have a fingerprint. And that fingerprint will say, did you send this from an iPhone? Did you send it from an Android? What OS did you send it from? Were you on a computer that's a Firefox browser? And were you on Mac or Windows? That's the fingerprint, right? So when Twitter bots come from like servers, there are ways, by the way, to craft a header and send it to emulate a device. And a lot of bots have moved that direction, by the way. That's not an uncommon feature. But even as recently as a couple of years ago, that was an uncommon feature because Twitter didn't have a way to parse between them. So back then, when you would see like I dealt with this in my own shenanigans, because like you'll start seeing your shit flagged, and it'll start getting taken down. You're like, man, what's happening? Oh, they're fingerprinting it. They see that this is coming from a post request on, my Linux server in DigitalOcean and not from like an iPhone. And then, by the way, the second thing that we did is there are these LTE repeaters you can get, and they look like these big boxes. And actually, in the wake of the Ukraine stuff, some of the quote unquote misinformation campaigns, they have some pictures online that they posted as they raided some of these places. And they basically look like a bunch of boxes, and you actually put in SIM cards into each. There'll be like 10 slots. So you'll buy a box, you can get it on AliExpress for about $200 a pop. and it will have functionally 10 Android phones in it. They're not phones with screens. It's just basically the circuit board of the phone, and they're in these boxes, and you just go in through and you go bloop, 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 and you just pop your SIMs in one by one, right? So when I was doing this, like toward the end, what I would do is I'd have about 200 of these, like 200 individual units, and 200 SIMs that would be just like, kind of like they'll text 1,000 times and then that SIM is spent. And so then I would actually program the box itself to basically craft a tweet, grab one of the programmatically made accounts and then send the tweet from that box, which would make it look like a cheap Android phone to Twitter. So that there are a lot of ways to get around that. But before I hand it back over, the other thing that I wanted to just address, because I kind of resonated with me when you were talking before a while ago, when you're talking about like kind of your own confirmation bias and wading through this information and understanding, there's different ways to look at it, as I've grown in like knowledge around my own sort of area, with data analytics, the thing that you start to appreciate is, how easy it is to miss these things, right? These people who aren't experts in this area, they're going to miss these things. And then the thing you think in your own mind is like, well, how many things do I miss because I'm not an expert? So like whenever I go and now it's like the more I know about my own field, the more sort of, I don't know what the word is, maybe humble, but that isn't necessarily what it feels like. But it's
the Dunning-Kruger effect. Is the more you know you don't know.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. That's the way to put it. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So now like things that I don't know a lot about, like I'll have an initial take and I'm like, well, is that really what I think? Is that really what's being said? And I'll question myself on that more, because I see how easy it is, like from my own perspective on certain types of things. So
yeah.
Anyway.
I think that's a really, really great dovetail into kind of where I was heading to is through, like I said, I was really, really wrong about my initial take on, they're not changing anything. This is still Snyder's movie. Whedon is just finishing it up. And so that made me kind of rethink my approach and learn, okay, I have to actually know how the industry works. And not only do I have to, go watch a YouTube video and understand or read an article or read the DGA guidelines and understand it, but then reach out to someone with experience with it and say, this is what I read, this is my take on it. Is that, in your experience, accurate? And I learned a lot over the past, the 3 years I spent covering this. A lot of it was institutional kind of knowledge about who does what and why and when and in the industry and in other situations, but also like Scotty was saying, a lot about myself and a lot about how I need to think about things and avoid confirmation bias. It's really easy to, for example, in the context of this article, say, well, I bet this person is writing this because they hate Snyder. And you get on their account and you search for a Snyder tweet and you find something they said negative about Snyder way back when. You're like, oh, there we go. Done.
There
deal.
it is. There it is.
And you stop immediately because you made an assumption and you found proof, right? And that's evidence, and that's solid, rock solid proof that you're right. But it's not. It's not a complete picture. And this happens especially with data because there's so many different angles to parse through. And so you can say, my own experience, for example, I was talking about Rotten Tomatoes data, and I'll do stuff like I'll pull all the data for one specific director, and then I'll say, here is the way that their career trended over time, or here's the genres of movies that were better received than others, and the ratio between audiences and critics, or critics and top critics, or whatever. And it's really easy to say like, oh, I bet that they have such and such a reputation because their audience scores are lower than their critic scores, and that'll prove whatever. And I'll find that, and I'll think, there we go, that's the proof. And I'll think I'll go ahead and write that as my angle. And I think, well, you know what? There's all this data that I didn't finish going through yet. Let me finish going through that. And then as I continue going through it, I'll realize like, oh wait, there's been instances where I found out, oh wait, that's actually bad data, like that. I'm using movies to make my decisions on this, that actually there was a review bomb that happened that I didn't know about, or maybe it was added before a certain feature in Twitter was added. So I'm actually comparing numbers that have no parity, thinking that they represent the same thing when they don't. Before, I think I said Twitter, but before Rotten Tomatoes added a feature, and I'll think that I'm comparing equivalent data that's not. And so the important point is to kind of it's important to have a process and think about things through all angles. And so the story that I was thinking of when Scotty was talking about his own personal journey and kind of learning this as well is the parable or the fable of the blind man and the elephant. I think is such a important thing that like lots of people forget about in lots of different contexts in society. But it's the idea that a handful of blind men went up and felt an elephant, and one guy felt the leg, and one guy felt the trunk, and one guy felt the tail, and they all thought it was drastically different things, but they were feeling it and touching it, right? They knew what it was. He's like, this is clearly a tree. I'm holding a tree right now. This is, it's the leg. And because they didn't go around and feel out the rest of what it was doing, they didn't know what it was. But there's also a huge communication aspect there, where someone will say, this is a tree, and someone else will say, oh no, it's clearly a rope, and they're holding the tail, and they'll say, I'm holding and touching a rope, and I'm telling you that's what this is. Don't tell me my experience is wrong. I'm physically experiencing this. And the person with the tree will be like, you're crazy. I'm touching it right now. You can't tell me that that's not a tree.
Yeah.
I'm experiencing this tree right now. And you see that when you kind of combine that with the tribalism aspect that I was talking about earlier, you get groups of people who have opinions about things based on a subset of the data, and it triggers their confirmation bias, and everyone else must be crazy because they're experiencing something different.
Yeah.
And I think that empathy is a really, really, really important tool to employ in that case. And I'm not strictly talking about empathy like, just kind of feeling for other people, but the ability to put yourself into someone else's shoes and ask, okay, if I'm this person, what's my experience with this?
Yeah.
And so you look at like the writers of this article, or you look at even the people that were sourced in it, or you look at other journalists, and it's like people will say like, why are journalists so against Snyder? And it's like, well, I don't know how, even as someone who is like quote unquote pro Snyder, who has said things like, oh, it'll take $40 million to complete, and then you get a dog pile of people coming at you. If you don't know how to separate yourself from that and look at how does this exist in a larger context, it feels like and looks like and seems like that entire tribe is attacking you and is all, and you have, once again, confirmation bias. You have all the proof you need. Look, there's 100 accounts calling me bad names.
Yeah.
Therefore, they're all like that. And so you read about an article like this online, you see the person get attacked, you stick up to defend them, you get attacked. You now are predisposed to believe that Snyder fans are A, bots, B, toxic. So you write an article later on and you reference that from your own experience, right? And then also maybe data. All the people that republished this report, everyone published it with their own kind of nuance and context. Some people downplayed it, some people leaned into it, but all of those people are people who have had experiences. It's the blind man and the elephant. They're like, oh no, this is a toxic fandom. I've been hounded by these people. I've had nasty DMs sent to me. I've had them dogpile me before, and you can't tell me it was just a subset of them. It happened to me with dozens or hundreds of people for days on end, and that's valid, and that's a problem. That's a real experience they had. Was it representative of the whole group? No. Is it responsible of them to categorize it as the whole group? Well, no. But how are they supposed to know not to do that? It's their experience that's the case. And then on the flip side, you've got people who are like Snyder fans who are like, oh, well, journalists are paid off, or journalists are are biased, or whatever. It's like, well, first of all, we just talked about how the journalists can perceive things as being an attack all the time, and so they will then behave as if they're being attacked. And then if they behave as if they're being attacked, then they look like they are painting the fandom a certain way. And so it's kind of a repeating cycle, or like a downward spiral of kind of a feedback loop of people, some people being toxic and irresponsible, and some people being insensitive and not looking at the whole picture, and then all of those, everybody looking on takes those subsets and then applies them to the entire group. And then everybody behaves as if everybody in the other group is a product of the worst sample set. And you lose all nuance. And if we're going to be talking at like as data points in a larger narrative, you totally lose any narrative that's important.
And Steven, you're so right, because one of the things that I've noticed about this fandom especially, I mean, like, yeah, there's Star Wars, there's different things, but this fandom especially, there's a lot of people who are trying to position themselves as being in the know. right? It's very important to people within the Snyder Cut fandom that they are in the know, that they have some knowledge, or that they know what's coming next, or they're for sure that they've seen this, or that they know what Zack Snyder thinks, or they know what Ray Fisher has thought, or or like all these things, and that's been either
Or they're
pro
a true
or negative.
fan because they
Yeah, they're
exemplify the
true-
qualities of the
Exactly. So you are not a
prototypical fan
Snyder
best,
Cut.
yeah.
You're not a Snyder fan, right? If you don't do these things, but then they keep changing the goalposts. They move the goalposts to like what that means, and who the heck knows anymore what it means to be a Snyder fan. Apparently, it's not good enough to love the movies and want to support that. It's it's this nebulous thing that we just kind of make up as we go along. And if Steven says something that I don't like about a Snyder movie or a Snyder thing or a comment or whatever, like, or even here, not absolutely demonizing somebody who said something negative about Zack Snyder, then all of a sudden, well, Steven's not a real fan, or Enosh isn't a real fan because Enosh didn't, take issue with this thing or whatever, or like even with the Flash movie, right? And like the direction that DC is going right now. So it's like, if you liked Peacemaker, oh, you betrayed the fandom. It's like this literally this over the top thing where it's like, you betrayed the fandom when I mentioned the fact that, like, literally echoing Ray Fisher's initial words, that I was going to watch the Flash but compartmentalize it and like push aside the fact that Walter Hamada was a part of it, and I disagreed with some of his decisions and things regarding where DC was going, but realizing that not everybody who partakes in the production and everything to do with the Flash movie is Walter Hamada, right? Or Toby Emmerich. That, like, there's different people working on these things, and there are people that I like. Ben Affleck's in this thing, and I don't think that Ben Affleck is betraying Zack Snyder. Like, I just don't buy that. The guy came back to do scenes for Zack, for free and just do them out of the love of his heart. So I don't think these people are like hating Zack or betraying Zack. But that brings up a great point with this super chat. Thank you so much, Ty, with the $40 super chat. Thank you, buddy. It says, Enosh, this might sound like a hot take, and I don't think it's a hot take. I think it's a legit question. It says, but I'm playing devil's advocate here. Let's say you plan on having Ray Fisher on to promote Rebel Moon, and you get a sneak peek of the movie, and the movie is awful. How do you handle it? This goes with being a professional, right? You don't handle it in the way that you just say, well, that sucked. Right? I mean, you know what I mean? It's like, you still have your opinion. You can have an opinion about a film. There's plenty of films that I don't think are brilliant films, but I can, like, you glean something out of it, Todd. You find the positive thing that spoke to you, and you critique the movie based on what you see. On the special effects, if I watch Rebel Moon and I don't think the effects are to par or whatever, I'm going to mention it. Just like when I watched Thor and I thought that the first half of the movie there was weird wonky effects going on, and so I'm going to share that, or whatever the case may be. It doesn't matter if it's Zack's movie. It doesn't matter if it's Ray Fisher's movie. This idea that everything that these people do, we have to somehow worship at that altar. I think that's a narrative that some fans have made up, and they're obviously following that. But I think the smart people that I try to associate with, and where I take this now, is that I'm going to like what I like, and if I don't like something, Todd, I will talk about that in a professional way. And if I had Ray on and there was something, I would ask him questions about maybe the takes on, why they made certain choices or whatever, because that's what you do if you're doing an interview or you're covering something like this. I'm not going to stand here and say that I'm going to love every Zack Snyder film for the rest of time, because I don't know. I can't tell you that. I know that there's some people who will just worship at that altar and they're just committed. It doesn't matter what they do. But I don't think that does anybody any good. That's like telling your child that they're excelling, like they're a great singer, and then they go on American Idol and like just, they get they just get leveled because, someone like Simon Cowell tells them the truth, and they're like, well, but my mom and dad told me that I was really good. Well, it doesn't really matter. It matters to tell the truth, to have legitimate conversations. And so, yeah, man, that's to answer that question. But I think that that's a question that the fandom needs to ask ourselves in general is, are we going to be truthful? Are we going to be honest? Like Antonio says here, are we going to be an objective Snyder fan? If you're a Snyder fan, if you're not a Snyder fan, can you be an objective non-fan? Right? Not just because I've seen some of that too. I want to be honest here. I've seen some this dogpiling, especially in the last day or so, that people saw these negative things, and all of a sudden every negative thing about Zack has got to be true because Rolling Stone wrote an article about it. Right? So like all of a sudden it's like both sides have their extremes. I don't know what to do about that. That's not something that we're going to ever solve.
Yeah. Well, because it requires everyone to kind of do what we're talking about here. We got to ask yourself, like, okay, I'd be curious if this is wrong, but I'd be of the opinion that anybody who is going to read this and then say, oh, everything I've ever heard that's negative about Zack is wrong, likely didn't do a complete 180 on their opinion of him because of that article. More than likely, they already were mixed or negative about him, and therefore predisposed to agree with it. Now, that doesn't mean that you're all, you can be biased and you can be right, but it's important to remember in the same way that, like, when I was reporting on the Snyder Cut itself and I found data that, or learned information about like the state of the cut, well, I didn't love, I would have preferred for it to have cost less money to make, but I can't just say, well, that's wrong because I don't like it or it doesn't line up with what I believe in. You got to take it seriously and look at all the, that was something that was cross-referenced multiple times with other, multiple people that were involved from both that worked with Snyder and were close with Snyder, and people that didn't and disagreed with him or whatever. And then, like, that's the only way that you can kind of come to a conclusion about that. But everybody at the same time is also, like, we've got, in the same way that you've got everyone with, like, the blind man and the elephant perceiving things differently, you've also got people who maybe they can perceive the whole thing and they're being shifty, or maybe they can only perceive a portion of it and are just fighting really hard for everyone to see things the same way that they do. Which is very understandable. Being a little more shifty isn't as definitely isn't as excusable. But you have people who will say, look at this part of the elephant, don't look at the rest of it. This is the only part that matters.
Right.
And that's where, that's a PR thing, really. It's and whether it's the fans saying, well, there's no toxicity in the fandom, it's like, well, you're not doing yourselves any favors there, because people aren't making up bad experiences. People aren't, fabricating the fact that there's bot activity. You've got to accept, okay, I believe that you had this experience, that you perceived this way, and you perceived this as being a representative sample. What does that mean? If you're just going to tell someone that experience isn't real, fandoms or Snyder fans aren't like that. We aren't bots. Is useless, because look at the evidence that's out there that's convincing all of the people who already want to believe it as such. But that's a big thing, especially like with an article like this, especially when it's citing people who admittedly, like, based on the context of the article, I would say that most of the people cited in this have a bone to pick. They either were targeted by negativity from the fandom or had a bad experience directly with Zack Snyder. I think the context is a little bit weird, because really it's saying, like, we got owned. And
yeah,
like, I get the frustration there, but also, like, they're saying a guy who got his movie screwed over, like, let's say that everything that they're painting is true. A guy who got his movie screwed over utilized marketing tools to raise awareness and get them to greenlight his cut. Like, I mean, he didn't go into Warner's vault and steal $100 million to make the movie with. They agreed because of the tactics. That doesn't mean that the tactics are good or bad, but I mean, like, if you believe that, like, Marvel isn't marketing movies with bots or not just say Marvel because it's DC, but I mean, or Sony or whoever isn't utilizing tools like this to promote their movies, like, that's just the way the way a lot of things work. So there's a lot of context necessary there. But I think that, so like we're talking, yeah, you got the perception and of why people are doing things and what's really going on is so key. And then, like I was saying before, definitionally, in my experience, like in miscommunication or in debate or whatever, like 90% of conflict, in my opinion, is always definitional. And it's after having a big fight, how often do you realize, like, oh, we see things the same way, we just disagree on what this word means, or the implications of this word, or what's the right word to use. And so with the entire time from the very beginning with Snyder Cut stuff, I use the reference of whether or not it existed, but I mean there was a larger kind of narrative contest at play, both externally but also like within fans. You had a debate for, what is this about? Is this a movement for artistic integrity? Is this a movement for a movie that we really want to see? Is this justice for Snyder and justice for Autumn, or is this Dark Side sounded really cool, I want to see that? Those are all valid, but it's important to represent it in a way that reflects good on you, but also represent it in a way that's accurate. If you're going to say this is all about raising funds for suicide prevention, and then you don't raise funds for suicide prevention, then you kind of destroy your own point. But so you have fans though saying, we want this movie and here are the reasons why. And here are the reasons why we think it was tanked. And those are all definitions. What is going on? Why is it going on? What is the motivation? There's a lot of details behind it, but ultimately it's a matter of applying a label to the situation. People who kind of land on the other side, people that didn't want the Snyder Cut, people that don't like Snyder, people that don't like the fans, are doing the same thing. This is about, it would be validating toxic fans to put the cut out there. Snyder's movies didn't make enough money, so this is a business thing. The movies weren't good, so it's an artistic decision.
No.
And so once again, this is another definitional thing where it's saying the thing that happened didn't really happen. It's saying the grassroots campaign to make the Snyder Cut happen wasn't actually grassroots. Therefore, it's all a lie, and the Snyder Cut is invalid and should not exist. Is kind of really the fundamental assertion. If it's not explicitly the intent of the article, that is the way some people are taking it, because that's kind of the way they see things already. And that's not going to be, that opinion isn't going to be changed because somebody is toxic towards them about that opinion. It's not going to be changed because of whatever information coming out. That's ultimately something that has to be the larger, more philosophical play of like what's going on here has to be understood. And like for me, the whole time this was a matter of Zack, the circumstances surrounding his departure were not fair to him. He was signed up to make this movie. They agreed to make the movie. They entered production. They changed the rules on him as it was in play, and they, to put it as unslanted as possible, benefited intentionally or circumstantially from the death of his daughter, that created an opportunity or a circumstance under which they now had the chance to have more control and make the changes that they wanted to the movie. There was reported and confirmed toxicity in the behind the scenes situation from the people that took the movie over from him, the full extent of which people could disagree on. Like, I know there's a lot of debate over that, but I mean, that is something that even Warner Media agrees. There were problems behind the scenes. People were fired. They might not have put it all out there, but I mean, Whedon, in his own words, kind of said exactly who he is in that last article about him that came out, or in that interview of him that came out. And so for me, like, speaking definitionally, it's very much a question of like, does he deserve the chance for this to happen? Was this an injustice to him? And then is it financially viable? Like, really are the two questions, right?
Yeah.
And so that's always kind of the angle that I've had and the angle that I've pushed. But people who don't want it aren't necessarily going to see those same things. They're going to say like, well, he was rightfully removed from the movie because the previous 2 movies I didn't like, or didn't hit the box office they should have, or, you know, whatever. And then they'll say stuff like this, and they'll say, well, look, he shouldn't have gotten it released because the methods that he used were wrong, or he encouraged toxic fandom. And they'll say, well, look at the results. They validated fans, and therefore the act of giving it this money is saying this is an okay way to behave. It's not protecting executives or other people at the company from this poor treatment. And I feel for that. Like whether or not the fandom as a whole was toxic, or the fandom as a whole was being mean or cruel or rude or whatever to these people, they weren't comfortable with it. I don't believe that these people are fabricating their perception of experiences. Maybe they're more sensitive to it than others, but as the other, you know, communication is sending and receiving. If somebody is receiving something that you're not sending, you can't change the way they receive it. You can only change the way that you're sending it in order to cater to what they're hearing. Yeah. And that requires a little bit more nuanced conversation than just spamming a hashtag and dogpiling and quote tweeting and just being louder. And so I don't know. I don't know if I have a full structure to a point that I'm getting with the whole thing, so much as there's a lot of, the biggest thing about this entire piece is just the context and understanding where people are coming from and why people are saying these things and kind of what it means. I do think that the analysis of the bot situation is a little underbaked, if not a little bit slanted due to confirmation bias or whatever other reasons. And I also think it misrepresents a few things or leaves out information. For example, it quoted someone saying, "I don't think it's organic. Where are the GoFundMe or Kickstarter events to fund all this?" And it's like, well, they were widely publicized where all these were. We know they exist. They were documented. It's provable. Or they were saying, "Oh, well, we were in the room with Joss Whedon and Kevin Tsujihara, and the test cut was horrible." It's like, well, we've seen the movie now, right? We've seen the movie. We know it's good. Like, these are all, maybe it explains their decision making at the time, flawed or not. But it's a little bit weird to kind of be putting that out when in the same way that, like, with Joss Whedon was like, he said Ray Fisher is a bad actor in both senses. And it's like, well, we've seen his performance. I don't know what you're talking about. Yeah. And so I think as people approach any of this, it's just really important to keep that all in mind, because the quickest and easiest thing to jump to is conspiracy, and our brains are really ready to agree with ourselves and prove ourselves right. And when you get conspiratorial, you start to find reasons to justify treating people differently, especially if you're grouping them together. And you can say, well, I've proven malintent for this person, and this other person is a lot like them, so I'll treat them both. Right. They deserve that treatment or whatever. And it's like, that's not helping anybody. You're only convincing them that you're toxic, like they already believe. And you're failing to gain insight or even build an ally, if possible, with that person. The press, like, for anyone who has been around the entire time, there was some acceptance in the press early on. Like, there were even people who hated the movie before, who hate Snyder before it came out, that were like, man, I just learned about what actually happened, and it's actually kind of messed up. And we're sympathetic. Or people that when the first petition came out, people would say, you know what, I'm not a fan of Snyder, but I will sign this petition because I don't think it's right what happened to him. But because of these battle lines being drawn and this grouping people into different labels and treating people different ways and kind of toxic back and forth, a lot of the people that were more accepting of it over time got less so, and to the point where, like, the majority of journalists dislike even talking about it, because even if you have a slightly positive angle but say one wrong thing and one wrong point, like if you're like, oh, BVS was a dour drag, but Snyder still deserved the Snyder cut and it was better than Justice League, people will be, instead of being like, oh, thank you for saying the Snyder cut was good, they'll be like, how dare you call BVS dour?
Exactly. It's all or nothing, man. Like, it's like people, that's the one thing that's been very disappointing to me in watching the fandom and not just the fandom, but then the other side, right? The naysayers, is that I feel like at this point, like even reading this article and like, you know, saying, well, all these people said that Zack said this or did this. Look, we don't know. There's people who could find me on a certain day, and if that's all they know of me, or they were around me when there was like a bad situation happening and I had to, you know, deal with it or whatever. When we have those moments where we have to take care of business, or we have to make sure that something's taken care of, there's a lot of people who could think, hey, well, you're just a jerk, you're just a dick, you're just, you know, controlling people or doing whatever. Like I had an awesome day on Sunday, right? I had a very awesome day on Sunday with my church, and we went out to a lake and we baptized people, and we had a big cookout, and it was awesome. We were eating hot dogs and food and everything. And then I had a guy who was part of our group going around to individuals that I found out and asking them for money, right? And it was like putting a damper on this, and I didn't know that this was happening, and so I had to go to this guy 3 times and go, look, if you have a need, we'll take care of that, but you can't be going to people like this, right? And then it ended up coming down to we had a young lady who is like in a bad situation. She's got 2 kids. She gave this guy her last dollar, and I was ticked. Because I'm like, dude, you know, you can't just, you know, he's got some other issues and stuff, but I was just like, you cannot be doing this. So, and I think about that, it's like somebody on the outside just watching me like deal with this guy who obviously has his own issues, but they could come in at some point and like, you know, later on, I'm just reading this article thinking about like later on somebody be like, well, yeah, I was there at that whole thing. And Enosh was yelling at this guy about, you know, money or whatever, because they don't have, just because you're there doesn't necessarily mean that you have the full grasp of what's going on, or why something is being said, or how something is being said. And we fall victim to that when we put ourselves in these camps where it's like, Zack Snyder can never do any wrong, right? I like Zack Snyder's movies, so Zack Snyder, he's a saint, he's an awesome guy, and I cannot imagine him doing anything wrong. Well, none of us are around Zack Snyder 24/7, except for his family, you know what I mean? You know, and whatnot, you know, and they're the ones who have to deal with him on that level. Like you said, like, and on the flip side of that, it's like if somebody doesn't like a film, so what? So what? Like, there's a time where you go, there's so many times where I've seen conversations online, and yes, I see the super chats, folks, so I'm going to get to them. But there's been so many times online where I've seen a conversation start, and I've started to say something, and because it's a differing opinion to mine, and then I stop and I realize something. I'm not going to change their mind. I'm not going to add anything really positive to this. This is not going to be an outcome other than to just drag me into a conversation that I really don't want to like invest a whole lot of my time and my life into. So I back off. And it's like, listen, I love BVS. I could go online. All of us could go online, folks, at any time and find somebody who hates BVS. They just hate it. They hate the concept. They blame Zack, even though the studio wanted to do BVS and like told him we're doing a Batman v Superman movie and you got to figure this out, and you know, and all these things. But they do that. Just because somebody else acts in a certain way also does not mean that you have to equally try to meet that same energy, I should say, you know. Or whatnot. So I got a couple super chats here I want to get to.
Can I interject something real quick? Because I got to bow out. And sorry to the super chats, but first of all, I just want to say it was a pleasure sharing a mind space with you both tonight. So thanks for the conversation.
Heck yeah, man.
And my final note is I wanted to say I really appreciated Stephen's words on empathy, which I won't rehash, but I appreciate you bringing that aspect up. And I think it's something that is worth reminding ourselves of as we engage with anybody online or otherwise. And I think that, social media and the sort of climate has sort of trained us that like, here's this issue, it's going to be gone tomorrow. So you better get your word in quick, and you don't stop to think about it as much, and I'm guilty of the same thing. But anyway, I just appreciated Stephen bringing that aspect up. But yeah, thanks overall for the conversation, and hope you all have a good night.
And thank you, Scotty. Yeah. Thank you, Scotty, for, for sharing the information that you did, because I think it's important to look at all those aspects, and it's good to have that information. If you just came in, rewatch what Scotty talked about at the beginning of the show, because it's very important when you look at this, the analytics of why some of this stuff is not just go, well, there's bots or there's not bots or whatever, but like how bots are used. They're a part of the online experience nowadays. And, so thank you, Scotty. Really appreciate you, man.
See you guys. Have a good night.
Thanks.
And just an update to everyone, the Nerd Queens, they're on their way in. They're in San Diego for the Comic-Con, and so they got caught in the city, so they're trying to get back to us as soon as they can. So 1,000-word pictures here. $5 super chat says, why do mainstream entertainment media hate when fans get their way? Post a complaint. Sonic's ugly design, now Zack Snyder's Justice League. They called us toxic long ago. I don't know, man. I think sometimes we perceive it that it's us versus them. We're the little guy, they're the big guy. They've got all this stuff, and so I think sometimes it's just sometimes it can be just a perception issue of we feel like they're in control, we're not in control. So when we don't get what we want, they're upset, and then then we do see some things that honestly, maybe you could speak to this a little bit. I know I got another super chat I got to get to, but maybe we come back to this. Steven, where we do see sometimes these pieces that are hit pieces, right? They come out and they seem to be these attacks on fandoms, or especially the Snyder Cut fans, right? I mean, like we've gotten these things, and so we can't just dismiss everything as just, well, it's just journalistic opinion or whatever, because there's just been a lot of stuff that has come out that has been in direct attack on certain people, or at least it's perceived that way, like if it really feels that way. I mean, like when we got the Snyder Cut, and we were 5 days out of getting the Snyder Cut, and all of a sudden here comes Ann Sarnoff basically telling us all, yeah, that we're cutting out the legs out from underneath it. There's a toxic fandom. We don't like that. We're not, listening to Ray Fisher. We're not giving you an air cut. Here's everything that we want to talk about. And it looked very systematically placed. I mean, like, what do you think about that, Stephen? Like with the Ann Sarnoff thing that came out, like, is that just us looking at that thinking, well, entertainment media is just mad that we got the Snyder Cut and they're just telling us, okay, shut up now, go away, kid? Or is there something more to that sometimes?
I think both to an extent. I think, like I said, it's really important to remember kind of where the person that you're talking about is coming from. Mm-hmm. And so, like, I know that a common touch point, at least a few years ago, for a lot of people in entertainment journalism was with like fan reactions. And this taints the Snyder Cut fandom a little bit too, because it in a way kind of grew out of this was Nolan's Batman movies, specifically The Dark Knight. Was widely liked, but there were some people who weren't as hot on it, and some people who were a little bit critical of Joker for a variety of reasons, some of which were, I don't think, I would maybe even hit even differently today for that character, but people thought, oh, it's kind of validating this anarchist kind of take on the character. It makes people have that, like, Joker was actually right kind of perspective sometimes, or, people do that with Thanos, or whatever. Yeah. And so you would have situations with a lot of different ones, but that's a big microcosm of, then they would get dogpiled by like heinously weird stuff. Just hate about you're wrong, you're stupid, you're whatever, you're lying for clout or whatever. Yeah. And sometimes that includes like some nasty threats and DMs and stuff. I mean, someone told me that I needed to be curb stomped once because I said that the Star Wars needs to phase out the Millennium Falcon, that they need new iconic ships, and the reliance on the Falcon is kind of holding them back. And someone was like, this guy needs to be curb stomped. I don't know if it was serious or not, but like, people just have reactions to this stuff, and being on the receiving end. I remember being new on Twitter, and like before I had a very big following, and you don't always have the same level of engagement, but if you have a big tweet that goes off, or if you develop enough of a reputation to have enough followers, or if you have if you write for a publication and people can access your contact information from the website or comment in the comment sections or whatever, and they have the ability to give feedback like directly to you, or if you have a YouTube channel and people go in the comments, you're all of a sudden exposed to a much larger set of opinions than you were before. Mm-hmm. And even if only 1% of those are negative, if you get 100 comments and you get one negative comment, you fixate on that. And if you get a handful of those, and they're people being mean, you remember that, and you remember like, oh, people with Joker avatars are
Right.
mean, and then eventually some of those people are Snyder fans. You kind of carry that grudge across, and so when you see then, you're talking about like Sonic fans. Well, someone with video game emojis has been mean to you for years as a video game journalist or whatever because they don't like your takes on video games, which is just your opinion. And then all of a sudden you see the studio bending over backwards because they sent similarly mean tweets, in your opinion, to the studio. And then you're going to say, why are you validating them? These are the people that have been behaving this way all the time, and now they're getting their way. And that's not to say that's the right way to approach it or not. That's a blind man and the elephant thing of maybe there's a larger subset of people here, but it takes in the same way that like fans have a hard time perceiving quote unquote bloggers or quote unquote verifieds as anything other than this one stereotypical person who has the same opinions and they're all exactly the same. It's even harder maybe from the other side to see fans or fan groups as anything else than this monolithic, they're all this way. And you treat them that way, and then they treat you that way back. And there's no way to break that unless you just stop. The only winning move is not to play.
Yeah, right. And sometimes it feels like the Kobayashi Maru, man, where it's like it's a no-win situation. You're never going to please everybody, and you're gonna have people who have those opinions. What's up, Todd, with a $20 super chat? Thank you, Todd. Says Enosh, now that all this new stuff has come out on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being unlikely and 10 being most likely, what number do you give that there will be a Zack Snyder's Justice League 2? So I thought about this because reading this article, it kind of almost reeks of like, because it's talking about a company that doesn't exist anymore. Like Warner Media is gone. You got a new regime, and I don't know, Todd. Like I'll be honest with you. There's part of me that almost feels like this is like the last hurrah, maybe for a group of people that maybe were upset at Zack because of him getting the cut. There's people, honestly, and I encounter them. They're honestly just mad because the Snyder Cut exists. That we actually got the Snyder Cut, that it came out. That there's people who are just ticked about it, and there's just no pleasing them. They exist. Let's not act like they don't exist. If people were at the company at the time and they disagreed with the Snyder Cut coming out, for example, maybe they were mad. I mean, in the article, you notice in the article, it's really weird because it's like talking about, well, people were getting fired and stuff, and they're just giving $100 million to this movie. Well, there's a lot of movies getting $100 million or $70 million. You know what I mean? Like, so, like that's their regular, that's their job. That's what the studio
why do you
does.
think people were being fired, and how do you think those people get employed when movies are being made? Like, there's like, it's such a weird, like, without $100 million budgets, people aren't working on. I mean, people are working on movies with lower budgets, but I'm saying like $100 million, that didn't go in Zack Snyder didn't even take a paycheck for this.
Right.
That $100 million went to employ VFX artists and marketing firms and people who didn't have work during COVID. So it's a
moot point, I feel like, because you're saying, well, these people don't have jobs, but yet that money, like you said, it went to people who were working on the film. Zack didn't even take money for doing it.
If you're talking about the executives and you're saying other executives were being fired and these executives were being fired and mad that Zack was getting $100 million, like, I get that. Without stating a particular opinion on it, I'll just say I think they're going to have a harder time getting sympathy for them, for Hollywood executives being temporarily out of a job than people are going to have sympathy for VFX artists who need the Snyder Cut to exist so that they can work on it. Like, I don't know. It was odd.
It's weird. It's really weird. And so, like, when I read this, I'll be honest with you, like, okay, I wasn't happy about it. You know what I mean? Like, I wasn't happy that, like, okay, all right, here's another, article that's, negative about Zack Snyder, the Snyder fandom or whatever. But in the same token, I almost kind of looked at it like, it doesn't, these people who are complaining at this point and didn't like it, I almost look at it as like, is it a thing of just a bunch of people who were just mad because it existed? They had an opinion about it. Obviously, there were executives. There were people who didn't want this. It was almost like they took it personally, like it was a slap to them that Zack Snyder would be able to come back and finish Justice League, right?
Well, and arguably could have even been something that led to their. I mean, a lot of people lost their jobs. I mean, Jeff Johns lost his job basically because of the first Justice League. He got made DC Films president right before it, like during production, and then he was removed as DC president like not long after it came out. I mean, there was a lot of decision making in there that really reflected bad on a lot of people. And to be fair to their opinion or to their perspective, maybe I should say, to question what part of the elephant they were feeling. I can see being in that position. You did what you thought was best for the movie. You were wrong, but you were doing what you thought was best. And then Zack Snyder and these fans who call you mean words came in and made you look bad.
Yeah.
And didn't understand what part of the elephant that you were feeling. They didn't understand that you were trying to do your best. And because of that, it put you in a bad light. And the studio didn't step in to do anything about it. And then they gave Zack Snyder his movie. And then they fired you. And like I said, I don't necessarily, it's hard to have sympathy for that. I think that there were bad decisions made. I think that there were questionably ethically questionable decisions made. But I can totally appreciate why somebody stepping out of that situation would be like, but you don't understand how much I got screwed here.
Yeah.
And believe that and have experienced that and feel pain over that. Feel pain and frustration and anxiety over that fact. Whether or not they are being truthful or accurate or perceiving things correctly is another matter. But that doesn't mean that they didn't experience what they believe to be unfair treatment in this situation. So it's important to just have an open mind to a lot of that.
Yeah. But to ask me like how, now that this article came out, does this affect Justice League 2 if it could ever happen? I don't think it does. I think we're in the same place that we always were, because honestly, I mean, I don't see Zaslav like looking at people that like he let go and thinking, oh, well, I value their opinion so much about who Zack Snyder is and what the Snyder cut was. I feel more like Zaslav as being the head of Warner, Discovery. He's looking at what's going to make us money, what's made us money, right? And for everybody who's out here with like a different analytic about, oh, Zack Snyder's Justice League like tanked, it didn't make anything. Oh, and let's be honest with you, the people who were like trying to inflate everything else to just point it out to us that Zack Snyder's Justice League didn't do as good as this movie. Right, this movie that was in the theater and was, like a new movie and everything, didn't have any baggage with it at all. It did better than Zack Snyder's Justice League. Okay, great. That's awesome. I want movies to do well, especially movies that I like. Look, I like the MonsterVerse, for example, right? Like I like Kong and Godzilla and stuff, and that's fine. You don't have to remind me every day though that like if it did better or worse than Zack Snyder's Justice League. I look at those things as two completely different things. Justice League was I don't like calling it the director's cut, but it was Zack Snyder's vision of what the movie in his head was. Obviously, if Zack had done his film in 2017, it wouldn't have been a 4-hour epic thing that we got, right? And everybody can argue whether or not it should have been. I've seen some people are like, well, the only reason it's 4 hours because you used all the slow motion and and everything. Look, I liked it. Like, hate me for it. I don't know. Like, I liked it. There's a lot of other people who like Zack Snyder's Justice League. If you don't like it, don't feel like it's a personal attack on you for some reason that other people like a movie. And if you love Zack Snyder's Justice League, if you like that movie, don't act like that just because somebody doesn't like it, that like they're your enemy or like they're a bad person or like there's something wrong with them. I got a friend, Crazy Joe, man. Like he comes on here all the time and sometimes he's got the craziest takes I've ever seen. And he prefers Justice League to Zack Snyder's Justice League because he likes a simpler time. Like I love Super Friends, man. I got the whole collection. I got all that stuff, but like that's what he likes. He likes more of the lighthearted stuff. He's like my age, but he likes more of the lighthearted stuff and he doesn't want it to be super serious. I respect that. And there's been lots of people Steven, who've messaged me when Joe's on, and they're just like, you shouldn't have Joe on. Joe hates the Snyder Cut. He talks bad about the Snyder Cut. He talks bad about, that movie, and he likes Justice League. If he likes Justice League, that means he likes Joss Whedon, and that's a horrible thing. And I'm just like, I know Joe. Joe's a good guy. Joe's got a young daughter, and he just wants to be able to watch a DC property with his daughter and just share, because she's 6 years old, and he doesn't want to feel like it's, I've talked to him about it. He doesn't want to feel like, she's seeing, too much, something that's serious.
Decapitation.
Yeah, right. And so, like, look, I get that. I absolutely get that. In the same light, there's those of us who want something more serious and grounded. And I think that there's room for all of it. And it doesn't mean that we're all, like, need to be hating each other or whatever. So if you ask me to answer the question, like, how likely is it? It's the same as it always has been. It's 50-50. It depends upon whether or not David Zaslav sees something in it going forward, right? That they can make money, that he feels like it's important enough that they can do it, that there's a market there. And also, if Zack Snyder wants to do it, has the time, wants to come back, what's the difference between the regime that was there and the regime that it's there now? It's like anything. Never say never just because. Like, to just be mad at something and just go, well, I don't think it's going to happen, so it's not going to happen. That's kind of where I'm at. So I don't think that this article is going to sway the powers that be that are there now. I do want to bring up also, I know and this is the last one. I got one more actually, and that's to it's not even to me. Okay, hold on a second here. We had a member chat, and so I want to get. I wish that they would do this. We got 2 member chats actually. We got Dad Dude Vince, been a member for 17 months, dude. Wow. Says great panel and great discussion. Thank you, Vince. And then Sean here's been a member for 16 months. You guys are awesome. Says bot membership. Yeah, get the bot memberships. Do what you got to do. It's fine. But then here we've got Andrew Nathan here, RPS, with a $1.99 super chat. Says, hey Steven, great article today.
Thank you.
And where can people find that article, by the way?
Screenrant.com.
There you go. So read that. Also, we got William here. Hey, William.
How you doing?
What's up, Mr. Shazam? How are you doing today? How are things in Vegas land?
100 degrees with the humidity, but I just got out of seeing Nope, so I literally came on right after seeing that. So it's a very weird movie. Weird movie.
Yeah.
But
So
like I said,
I'll bring you up to speed on where we're at. We had Scotty on earlier talking about the ramifications of the bots and how bots are just a common thing nowadays and stuff. And we've just been having this conversation. We're waiting for the Nerd Queens. They're in transit, so we're waiting for them to show up. But I don't know, man. Like, what are your thoughts? We've been having a great discussion, I think, about this and what it means, to all of us as fans, and how we can't take everything personally, and don't go after somebody who writes an article just because they have a certain opinion about it or a certain point of view on it. And Scotty even talked about the fact that, like, the particulars of some of the digital stuff, like, that it can be misinterpreted. That he felt it was misinterpreted by the writer of the article and whatnot. Scotty's, man, I love Scotty. Scotty is, like, so on.
Scotty's an asset. Yeah, I love having him on when we do our show. Starting with the bots. I thought the bots thing was the thing I moved past immediately because I thought it was a worthless piece of information, and here's why. And I said this earlier today when the stream I was on. Analytically, okay, say for instance, I got 15% of all my feedback. I use Constant Contact. I use all these things to gather information about the store or promotions, anything like that, right? That isn't the sole thing that I'm using. I have other things to line up with that. So even if I have 15% that are just fake, I have other things that line up that mirror and overlap to the point where you can come to a consensus of what's real and not. And these multi-billion-dollar companies have that too. So the fact that there are bots, that was probably the most meaningless part of the article. In regards to the article itself, listen, and I'll say this over and over again: don't insult people, don't threaten people. If you disagree, that's one thing. The fact that Rolling Stone is a credible publication, that's great. I'm 47 years old. I've been a subscriber since Rolling Stone since the strength of it was its paper format. And it's a different Rolling Stone today. I'm not saying it's a dirt sheet, but it is in an atmosphere that it has to compete with a lot of different things that it didn't have to compete when I was buying it in the 90s, so they have to conform to certain things. Now, as far as reading the article in the context that it was meant, what I did is I divorced the Zack Snyder aspect of it and looked at what the point that was trying to be put forth. The problem I had with the article and anybody discussing it, the words "if true" and "if this is true" and too many conjecture, those words came up too many times for me to be able to build a bridge one way or another. And that, to me, I'm not going to call this person a liar. Everything she says can be 100% true. But when you put it in front of me in an article, in a finished product, I can't have that many bridges. And then somebody on the stream that I was on today brought up, I think it was already brought up, well, everybody has nameless sources. Look at Watergate. By the time it ended up on Woodward Bernstein's table, there was enough credibility to the Watergate story, and there was already investigations being done. There was an arrest made. There was all kinds of things that you can have, and every unnamed source they had was balanced by 3/4 of something that could be proven and followed all the way through. There were too many things in this article that I couldn't follow all the way through to something I could be proven. So it's up to the listener or the viewer or the reader to use their own common sense. And to be honest with you, as a fandom, be smarter. The third thing that bothered me about the whole thing is that the fact that there are people doing victory laps of validation. What? I don't get that. Since I've joined this, I've never gotten to a point where you being proven right meant anything to me. I don't know who you are. I generally don't care who you are. You don't know who I am. You doing a happy dance that's something you may have believed may have been validated. What does that even mean? How is that a win for anybody? So that's the 24 hours has been for me. Like
we've talked about that before. That it's like, look, just because whatever information comes out, man. Like if the SnyderVerse continues, great. If it doesn't continue, like if Zack Snyder and David Zaslav stand on a podium and like tell me like one day it's not happening, just let it go. Like that's okay.
Yeah.
Like,
I'm gonna get up the next morning.
I'm gonna get up the next morning. I'm gonna talk about something else. Like we talk about other stuff here on the channel. We're gonna talk about whatever else comes out. But like, you don't win. Like if you didn't want it to happen, you don't win. Like everybody's like it is very much like we all kind of retreat to our own little villages, and it's like it's us versus them kind of thing. It's like I told you every little article that comes out. Like, well, I mean, like in Steven, you've been a part of this, and you and I have talked a lot on streams about like the Ezra Miller situation, right? So it's like if Ezra Miller is vindicated, and and they're innocent, right? Of the things that have come up about him. Okay, great. The truth came out, right? But if truth comes out that there were circumstances that Ezra was guilty of various things, okay, we talk about that. But like the people who come at us and tweet at us and come in the chat and say things, just nonsense comments just after each other, like you said, William, people think that they won something, like that they're I don't know, this need to be in the group
it's like
that
to
was
dominate
right
or destroy somebody. It's almost like some of the responses I've heard today are like, all I wanted was the movie and as much from the story that I could get. And I got the movie, and if I can get anything more, great. But if I don't, I'm not going to get put on one of my championship belts for every win. I'm like, well, I don't understand. I don't understand this mentality,
I think one of the things that taints the situation, and also is not consistent with all people, that's why a lot of people don't understand it. From my perspective, there's a lot of fandom hierarchy and kind of popularity going on because there's a tribal nature of it. Some people get their socialization and their validation and kind of self-worth from these from their fandom, from the things that they like and the people that like the same thing. And sometimes that means, especially on social media, that gets measured in likes and retweets and engagement and people patting you on the back and you being right over somebody else. And weirdly, that translates into stuff that like people have no way of knowing about. That'll be like what actually happened behind closed doors. People will have a theory and then it gets proven right. And they say like, oh, I'm so smart because of this. It's like, well, maybe you made a good guess, but like you didn't know. And it's really important to not use like a good guess as like validation of your intelligence, or to assume like, oh, this means that I'm a better fan because I know this, or this means I'm a smarter person because I know this, unless you can prove that like you always know what's going on. But even that's hard because we all forget the times that we're wrong and remember the times we're right.
Right.
And so we're like, oh, I've got a perfect track record, but the other guy, I've got screenshots of every single time he's wrong. Meanwhile, we have no idea what percentage.
I've gone back 5 years, man, and combed all of his videos. Like, and this time he said something negative about Zack Snyder, or said this person or that.
And I know I was wrong that one time, but here's why I wasn't actually wrong, or here's
yes, the apology without apologizing, yes.
And so I think one of the during like in 2019 maybe, as a lot of this was going on, and I was like deep in like trying to figure out what's up with the Snyder Cut, what's up with fan groups and other people. I read the book Loser Think by Scott Adams, the guy who wrote Dilbert, which after I read it, I kind of learned he's a little kind of fringe politically, so that's not an endorsement of him. But the book itself at the time was great. And the idea is it's really just kind of a new way to think about logic and avoid thought traps. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that stuck with me that I think of like on a daily basis is that how sure you are that you are right has absolutely no bearing on whether or not you're right. Mm. And so like you can be fired up about something and you can feel it in your gut that you are right. That's entirely detached from facts and evidence and logic and everything. That's just a feeling of a chemical feeling in your stomach and your brain that's saying like you are right. Peacock that, and it's hard to fight, but it's really important to remember like, okay, I'm really confident about this, but that confidence is it's not necessarily misplaced. It's just not proof of anything, but we tend to kind of rely on that kind of gut instinct. And it's really, really important in those cases to say, okay, I'm sure of this, but instead of relying on my confidence to know the outcome, I'll rely on my confidence to like follow the trail. And then you go, but once again, you got to be careful of that confirmation bias, because you're going to go and you're going to find all these dots that you can connect, and you're going to ignore all the dots that you don't want to connect, and then you're going to say, there, that's proof. And so it's, like I said, I said earlier, it's really, really important to kind of follow a means of thinking, or a thought process. I heard the term sense-making mechanism used one time, and as like a philosophical kind of, I think way too much about everything. I loved that term. But a thought tool, a mental tool that you use to evaluate everything the same way, so that you know you're giving things equal weight. But then also pay attention to how often are you right and how often are you wrong. Does your tool, does your process, the way that you analyze things need to be adjusted because you happen to be wrong too often? And a lot of people just kind of focus on the immediate, oh, I'm sure that I'm right. And then by the time it turns out they're wrong, they're like, oh, well, whatever. There's another thing that I'm sure about now, and I'll focus on that. And it's really easy to just hop from thing to thing to thing to thing, always being fired up about like being sure you're right. And you don't only like have a pretty good odds that you're actually wrong, but also even if you are right, you're missing all sorts of important nuance and context that you could be gathering to properly understand and properly communicate why you're right to other people. So it doesn't do anyone a service to just be like sure of yourself and then do a dance when it turns out that you just happened to spin a wheel and guess the right.
Yeah. Right. I mean, it's like some of this stuff. I watch people, especially in the YouTube communities, right, and Twitter and everything, and like some of these people don't know how things work. Right, they don't know how Hollywood works. They're on the outside and they see bad stuff being said or something, and they're like, oh yeah, so I have an opinion about that, right? And this is my opinion, and I there's a reason why I have my opinion, and you can't tell me and whatnot. And they start drawing these lines in the sand for a not just a company, but a genre, an industry, right? An industry that they don't work in, right? They don't work in. It's like people who are like, oh, this movie has bad writing. Okay, well, you might not like the writing in it, but like, how do you quantify the fact that you say that it's bad writing?
Yeah.
What do you know about writing? And I know people are like, oh, so you're saying that I gotta be a writer or I gotta be a critic to be able... No, I'm not saying. I'm saying you can critique things that you like or don't like, but to make actual statements about like this is bad or that's bad, you do need to have some understanding of the thing that you're critiquing.
Or go back to that point about empathy. Maybe you don't understand it, but can you try to put yourself in their shoes? And a lot of people will say like, oh, well, sure, if I were in their shoes, I wouldn't be such an idiot. It's like, well, no,
right.
that's
right.
not
you
what
don't
I mean.
know the pressures. You don't know the pressures. You don't know what the stipulations have been put on people behind the scenes. Look at all this right now with like, oh, every movie's got to be 2 hours long. It's got to be 2 hours. And you're a storyteller that's trying to tell a story and tell, this thing. And you can't always get it in that amount of time, maybe, or whatever. And it's like, but you got to cut it down. So then that writer, that director is now going back through this movie and saying, okay, well, what can we cut out? I understand it, man. I get it. Like, you create something, you shoot everything. I've done some short films. I've filmed stuff. And it's like, sometimes you got this stuff that you just think is absolute gold, but you only have so much time. We used to make short videos for our church, right? And there were times, man, I'd have 10 minutes worth of stuff, and 10 minutes doesn't seem very long, but when you're in a church service, it's an eternity, right? And so like we're trying to make these funny little things, but the problem is if you go on for 10 minutes, no matter how funny it is to you, no matter how like entertaining it is to you, at some point somebody's going to go, "Hey, that's not what I'm here for."
It's like
right. I'm not here to see a short film by Enosh in the church. I'm fine with a little commercial kind of, fun thing, but you can't get every joke in. So you got to start trimming it away. And then some people would go, well, it would have been better if we had seen the whole thing. Well, maybe. Like, and then sometimes I've shown the whole thing and it's been like, man, like I'm halfway through it and I'm watching everybody and they like it, but like at the same time, it's uncomfortable now. And it's like, oh, well, maybe I should have cut that out. So the pressure on that.
And as I mentioned on the vodka stream, like 300 was 2 hours because it was so VFX heavy and they wrote something that was compact and wouldn't be as intensive for like post-production stuff. So it was designed that way for production purposes by Zack. Watchmen, the theatrical cut was 2.5 hours. There was 30 minutes or whatever cut out of it from the director's cut. That was because Zack wanted it to be displayed on IMAX, and IMAX reels have a physical restriction, meaning you can't have more footage on it. So that's not the studio coming in and cutting it down. And then obviously BVS was, that was studio manipulation. Obviously Justice League was, but these are, all different situations. One, it was designed to be that short. The other one, it was Zack had to choose between runtime versus displaying it in the format he wanted to, and he prioritized the format, which means he could, per his own priorities, couldn't fit the other 30 minutes in there and did it as a home release. And the other ones are different, but it's really easy to look at that and say, oh, well, his movies are always better, longer, and the studio is always making him do it shorter. And it's like, well, no, a lot of these are really different situations. Even with BVS, he was like, okay, fine, I'll get my ultimate cut. I don't prefer the theatrical cut, but he agreed ahead of time. They had an agreement that it would be released. And so he was, he agreed to that call, saying, I'll let you release this shorter version if you guarantee my director's cut, as we've done in the past. And so, that not everything is exactly like Justice League, but it's really easy to just assume that it is. And then once again, that confirmation bias is like, yep, you're right about that. No reason to look into the details anymore.
And wherever this ends up, you have to lie the blame immediately where it goes to. I can go after toxic fans, and there are out there. Right? We're not even. We all know who they are. We know where they are. But the initial blame, the original sin that still lasts to today, is companies change directions all the time. They change directors. It happens. Movies change directions. it happens seamlessly, and we don't ever hear about it in many cases, or the effects are minimal. The problem with WB did is they decided that they wanted to change direction and then didn't have any direction to go in. Unless you had something to pull out of your magic bag to replace what you were about to disrupt and destroy, you were setting yourself up for years of failure, not just a movie, years of failure and a crisis of confidence in what they have now. How many times has WB or they've come out with a movie that we don't think is going to happen, or we're questionable about what the quality is going to be? I mean, because of the fact that that original sin was why we're all even here. This article, I mean, I wish it would have been an extra paragraph to that. Oh, by the way, the original blunder was blowing up a plan. It's like quitting your job and you got kids to feed and you don't have another job lined up. That's what WB was. So the original sin belongs with them. But when it came to this article, and I read it a couple of times just to make sure, and like I said, I divorced myself from the whole Snyderism. And somebody asked me today, well, if it was an article defending Snyder and saying the Snyder Cut was coming back, would you be as critical of it? Yeah. And I asked this particular person, you find me on any stream where I haven't been consistently being devil advocate or due process, even with the Ezra Miller situation. I declined to say certain things about that because I didn't believe I was qualified to do so. But the same thing is here. If somebody were to say, we're getting Justice League 2 and 3 tomorrow, and Steven was to come up and say, you know what, where are you getting your information from? Where can I trace, your credibility to? He's got a legitimate gripe. He's got a legitimate question. And anybody that had legitimate gripes about this article, it shouldn't be looked at as some kind of cult member or somebody that has a problem. There are a lot of problems. There are things that should be in quotes in this article that is referring to something someone said that is not in quotes. Because once you put something in quotes, I'm not the English major, but you can go back to that person and say, did you say that or what? Otherwise, it's hearsay. It's hearsay. And when you have a bridge built on hearsay, you're usually going to end up in the water in the bottom of whatever. So I had a lot of problems. She could be telling 100% truth. It's just that she did not give me the tools to take it to the finish line. So there's valid criticism for that article. I just took it for what it was. I mean, it's not a hit piece because of the content. It's a hit piece because when it was released. I mean, digital release, here you come with an article. That's the media for you. But once again, if you're going to do that, you need to have it cemented. I should have zero questions about that much credibility. And like I said, everything in that article was a toss-up. It was conjecture. Yeah. It was hearsay. And it exploded the internet in a way that I'm like, what the hell were you people doing before this story came out? We're talking about bots that we were talking about 3 or 4 months ago that didn't mean anything then, but now all of a sudden means something now. We're talking about hearsay, rumor, and like I said, it's the Rolling Stone. It's telling you. So listen, I've been following the news since Reagan got shot in the 80s, right? I've followed every major news program, news story. I just fill my head with news. There are credible journalism journalists with 40 years of experience that don't get it right all the time and have to retract stuff a lot. But that doesn't make the news. The plane landing safely is not going to make the news. The plane crashing is always going to make the news. You bury somebody on the front page, but you exonerate them on the back page. That happens every day. So just because it's the Rolling Stone and it's credible journalism doesn't mean that this story meets the smell test. She could be telling everything, the truthful thing that she's telling, but it's based on things that I just can't rely on. And there are motives. I mean, a lot of these people, unnamed, unsourced, are people who probably don't have jobs anymore. Or probably diminished positions. I mean, I hate to say that, but that's but she didn't do enough in this article to prove that can't be a possibility. So I didn't toss the article, but I just put it in my catalog. Okay, that happened.
Well, so and I think that the way that if it's not apparent from my multiple monologues tonight, the way that we look at this and understand it is just as important as like the way that we kind of talk about it and approach it. And I wrote my article on Screen Rant is like really long, so I'm not going to summarize or go over the whole thing. But if anyone's interested in like the details, obviously I want people to read it because I wrote it, but also I would hope that it's educational. Actually, Robert Burnett read it or a chunk of it on his show today, which is really cool. So maybe cool. If you don't like reading, go check that out. But I think that when you're kind of contextualizing what this article is, like people are focusing on bots, and there's a lot of information on bots we talked about earlier. But what is like the question of what is the article saying? Why is it saying it? what does it mean and what matters are like all very relevant things we need to answer. And there's a lot of, understandably, people on like Twitter being like, I'm not a bot, like we're not bots, we're not, and like that's cool. And like, I'm not going to say it's not relevant or that people don't need to, shouldn't go and kind of reinforce that. But that's not the point. The point of kind of what the article was getting at was to say that the groundswell of demand that caused Warner Brothers to greenlight the Snyder Cut was false. And so therefore this is all built on a lie, and therefore there shouldn't be, that's why there's no more happening. Whether or not there's bots is really kind of irrelevant to the fact, because first of all, was Zack done wrong? Did he get his cutout? Did Warner Brothers agree to put the cutout? Whether or not he used bots, or whether or not he was involved in using bots, whether bots were used on his behalf, whatever, maybe you can use that to influence your perception on his character. But even then, like, I would understand why someone would do that if I were in those shoes. But I think the big thing, and the way I approached it in my piece, is like the bots apply to social media specifically, and like boosting Twitter engagement, boosting Facebook and Instagram or whatever is the claims that they are making. But that's not all of the engagement. You can't measure, like, if it was only Twitter activity, like, it was always important, and this is a point that I always made. It was really important, if you want to convince them to greenlight the movie, to demonstrate engagement beyond just Twitter for a variety of reasons. And there is activity that demonstrates that. You have the GoFundMes and the money raised. You have multiple social media analytics firms that are measuring things outside of simply Twitter and doing some of their own bot analysis to make sure that their numbers are accurate. Like Parrot Analytics saying it's the most in-demand movie. But you have SnyderCon sold out 200 something tickets in like a matter of like, I don't remember how fast those sold out, but you packed a room with fairly short notice of people. Obviously that doesn't demonstrate millions or even thousands of people, but it shows that like there is something real here. The question is how much of it is bots and how much of it was real. And per their own data, worst case scenario, well, I guess they said at least, so maybe it could be more, but per their own data, it's around 13%. Even if we accept that
of online posts.
Yeah, even if we say, yes, 13%, like, for the sake of argument, since we don't know what the data is specifically, we don't know how valid it is. Yeah, so you're saying like 87% of what was going on there is valid.
Yeah.
And then you look at, okay, so therefore, if it was all fake, then the movie would come out, and there'd be no demand for it, and it would flop. And so that's another thing, people have claimed it flopped. But there's the difference between flop and like third place or whatever is pretty significant, right? And so you look at all the different bits of data, and Warner Media didn't release, or HBO Max didn't release official numbers. But even with Samba TV, which I know people don't like because they say that these other movies did bigger, it performed on par with Dune, which was seen as a success. It performed slightly under Wonder Woman, which was seen as a success. It was also the first movie released on HBO Max, meaning that they hadn't grown their subscriber base that big at the time. Like, there were millions of subscribers added after the Snyder Cut, because of the Snyder Cut or not. But in Q1, I think, of 2021, they added 3 million subscribers, and they added, millions more throughout the year. So by the time you get to something like the Suicide Squad later in the year, you've got 5, 10 million, whatever, more subscribers on the platform to view anything than when the Snyder Cut was there. So your people are comparing like, oh, Suicide Squad did more, therefore the Snyder Cut did poorly. It's like, well, no, that's not the case. You look at Canada, Crave in Canada and Binge in Australia are the local streaming services, because they didn't have HBO Max, they had the rights. Both of them say it was the biggest premiere they had of all time. Crave said it beat the season finale of Game of Thrones.
Right. Yeah.
Parrot Analytics, or not Parrot, Samba TV's analytics, in one of the tweets they say like the Snyder Cut had 3.7 million views over the first 39 days or something like that. In the tweet they say on HBO Max. So does that include Crave? Does that include Binge? And are those representative samples? Is Samba a representative sample? Because that's only smart TVs and only certain regions. And I'm not going to say that it's wrong or anything, but even if it's right, it's competitive with other big 20. The top 10 movies in a given year are all good. You could be number 7, number 8, number 9, and that doesn't mean that like you flopped. The numbers that were posted were right up there with other movies that weren't criticized to the same extent. And so I don't know. There's a lot of other details to go into, but I think the most important thing is like you don't even need to disprove the bot number. You have proof that the campaign was organic to a large extent. You have proof that there was big engagement, whether or not it was the number 1 movie or the number 5 movie or the number 10 movie, whatever. It was one of the biggest movies on social media. And you see now the digital release is coming out in 2022. And last I checked, it was 3rd on iTunes for digital downloads today, behind Jurassic World Dominion and behind The Black Phone, which were both recently released in theaters, if not still in theaters in many places. And it was beating Everything Everywhere All at Once, which is having a big post-theater resurgence, and The Northman, which is doing pretty big on VOD, and some other 2010. Like it's the best movie that was released prior to 2022 in the top 15 on iTunes. Yeah. Like that. Who knows how big that means it is? Like there's a lot of context that's missing from those numbers, but proportionally speaking, compared to the other data for the other movies we have, it's right in line with it. It's, if not impressive, that it's that competitive. So
well, and here's the thing too.
And that's accepting the bots. That's accepting. Let's say Snyder bought bots. Let's say the whole thing was fabricated by Snyder. Well, the views mean that none of that matters anyway. If all the campaigns were just Zack Snyder tweeting from behind his computer, and he was every single person on Twitter doing a tweet,
right,
and he was just hiring bot firms, and nobody actually wanted the movie, well, it performed in line with others, with a lot of things, and better than some things. Or like I guess one last point, and then I'll stop because we've been going for so long. But with Samba TV, while Zack Snyder's Justice League did like 1.7, 1.8, I think, for the first 4 days, Mortal Kombat did like 3.8 million or something like that, and which is like way more. But then you look at like Apptopia data. Apptopia measures application downloads from the App Store, as well as like time used, or like what it's being used on. Or sorry, I don't think it can't measure what it's used on, but it measures just like high level data. Like they opened HBO Max for this many hours on this day. Yeah. And when Zack Snyder's Justice League came out, there was like a 68% boost in downloads of the HBO Max app on that day. And then when Mortal Kombat came out, it was actually like a 3% or like a just under. It was actually a decline versus the week before, and how much Mortal Kombat was. And there was also a decline in total time spent in the HBO Max app when Mortal Kombat came out. So that's not to say Parrot Analytics is necessarily wrong, but it shows you that the data that these people are parading around as if it's definitive about anything isn't really that definitive. It shows that it all agrees that Zack Snyder's Justice League was popular. We just don't know exactly where it fits compared to other things. And HBO Max won't release that data for whatever reason. People will leak documents about the social media activity, but no one's going to leak the viewership numbers, I guess. Or I guess they could leak the Ray Fisher investigation, I guess, while they're at it, unless neither of those support this case. But
well, and the thing is like when you talk about whether a movie like lost or made money, okay, take out the fact that Zack Snyder or just Justice League, right? Justice League, or whatever you want to call it, Justice League for lack of a better term, in 2017, it didn't do what they wanted it to do, right? It was widely panned. What did it end up? $600 and something million.
$658 million.
Yeah, something like that, right? So the thing is that yes, they invested some money into Zack Snyder's vision, but like Steven just said, even if Zack Snyder's responsible for all of this, right? He's systematically like worked the system to get his version of the film out there.
Pulled a Lex Luthor.
Yeah. Oh my
First
God.
time anyone has ever accused Zack of giving an accurate representation of Lex Luthor. I'll say.
I'm just saying, like, okay, but it's comments like that, Steven, that like take me out of that article, right? Or take me out of because like you said, it's no longer, hey, we're looking at the actual data, we're just examining this and trying to do this. It makes it a personal kind of thing when you add those kind of comments to it. Oh, he's Lex Luthor, he's trying to do this. But I like this comment. It was up here earlier, and we never read it. But Andrew here said, Robert Meyer Burnett said it best today. WB executives are mad, and I should say probably former WB executives are mad that Snyder beat them at their own game because for decades Hollywood has screwed over talent, and now Snyder got them to pay $70 million for his film. My question is like, first of all, like, look, nobody's ever forced me to like a Zack Snyder project. Nobody ever forced me to use the hashtag. Nobody, you know what I mean? Like, nobody bought me off. Zack Snyder didn't call me up and say, hey, Enosh, like, I want you to do this, right? I did it because I wanted to see the movie, first of all. I wanted to see as Zack's thing. And look, my history with the whole thing is I've documented, even though people like have all kinds of like alternative histories of my love of Zack Snyder. Apparently it's a multiverse, I guess. My thing was that I always loved Zack's stuff. I loved Man of Steel, loved BVS. I defended BVS against everybody and their cousin. And then, like I've loved everything that's come out. But then when Justice League came out, I was like a lot of people, man. I took my kids to go see Justice League. We came back, we made a video about it. We're like, hey, we were just kind of excited just to see our heroes on the big screen, And then the more I watched it, I was like, this isn't what I think it should be. This doesn't make any sense compared with Zack's other work. But like you said earlier, we were told, Steven, that this was Zack's vision, that it was just being brought to light because Zack couldn't finish the film. And so we took it for what it was. But then stuff just started to not add up when Zack started talking about things that didn't add up with the movie. Like, that, for example, Dick Grayson was dead. And we're like, well, wait, what? Like, how does that work? And but everything was saying, well, Zack has walked away. That's why I kind of laugh every time I see somebody like talk about, well, Zack is never going to come back to Warner Brothers. Warner Brothers is never going to hire Zack back. Nothing's ever going to happen. I mean, look, they were saying that in 2016, 17. They were saying Zack has walked away from it. That's why I started questioning it, because I used to take things at face value. I used to be like a lot of you people who are in the chat and watching this right now, where I'd read an article and I go, oh, well, that's what happened. Okay. Zack Snyder's this horrible person. Zack Snyder walked away from this. Zack Snyder did this and that and walked out on them. And boy, thanks to Joss Whedon, we got something, like he saved it, because that was the narrative that was back then. Joss Whedon saved Justice League, even though he ruined it. And I used to take things at face value. Well, the deeper I got into it, I started realizing, oh, people have narratives. People have and I hate the word, but people have an agenda that they want to push, that they want this idea to be out there. And I'm sorry, man, but like the agenda that was coming out against Zack was pretty evident, and like I said, nobody had to sign me up, man. Zack didn't have to, convince me. I just saw from the outside and I was like, hey, I want to support this thing. Lots of good people came together for something good, because they wanted to support Zack, his family, and raise money for suicide prevention. And I saw a comment earlier that said, well, the fandom hasn't been good in a long time. No, that's BS. I'm sorry. Like, I respect people's opinion, but
I was never bad.
Yeah, I was never bad. Like we aren't bad. We didn't change. Those of us who like we're not inherently bad or good. Yeah, who's the we?
What's the fandom?
Right.
Yeah, I got annoyed earlier.
So like
today
there's some bad people over here. Does that mean that the fandom became evil all of a sudden? Did we all become like Luthor bots, right? Like we're all controlled by Lex Luthor and we're doing his. That doesn't make any sense in the real world. Can we stop with the conspiracy theories, for God's sake? It's just.
I take it as a personal insult. Like I said, when I listen to some of these streams, and like I said, we're not naive. We know that they're out there. But I've done my part to purchase the stuff as a consumer. I've done my part wherever I'm on anybody's screen to never threaten anybody, to never take it to that line. And when one person used as a whole to describe us, and I'm like, well, if I'm sitting here on this screen and I'm not doing any of these stuff, the as a whole is automatically defeated right there. You aim that trajectory, aim that barb at the person, those people that are doing it. But I have never engaged with anybody personally. I know they're out there, but I don't engage with people who act like this. I don't get on the screen with people who act like this. I mean, and I told the guy, find something in the last year or so that I've been online or anywhere where I've associated with that. And then, like I said, even if I'm just that one person, but they jump on this train and they want to pick out the people that are acting like buffoons. But like I said, if I'm in the room, you need to acknowledge I'm in the room and I'm not doing any of this nonsense. And that the vast majority of us are not. The loud extremists are great. That's like terrorist organizations. No terrorist organization makes up all of an ethnic group. The half percentile gets the news.
Well, it's like this says, it's just one more thing that kind of pops up, and where I agree with Scotty, and I do agree with Steven, that it's like I don't feel that like we should go after this person for writing the article or whatever. Read the article, determine where you fall in that. I when I read that article and they're talking about people who are doing certain things, you know what? Yeah, my brain automatically goes to there's certain people, right, that I know in the fandom who act in certain ways that are like this, right? That they've done things, and I can think about stuff. And when we start talking about bots and stuff like that, and there's people that I don't put that past, but I do know this. At the end of the day, that does not represent everybody that I know who's a part of this thing that brought us together, right? I know Steven because of the Snyder Cut movement, because that's how I met Steven. That's how I met Dave, the film junkie. That's how I met William. That's how I met all these people who are a part of my life now. We weren't out here like hurting anybody or doing anything. We were literally just talking about this thing that we love. So I get it where we take it personally, and maybe there's a part of us that needs to not take it personally because we know that we're not those people. But the problem is when we read an article like this, it does tend to lump everybody together and act like if you were a part of this, like, well, you may not be the bad person, but you're part of a bad thing.
Well, and it's frustrating for me, and this is part of the reason that I've always kind of been a little bit at arm's length from the fandom, is that because I would always catch it from both sides. Why are you validating this on one side, and on the other side was why aren't you reporting more positive facts about it on the other side?
Yeah.
And when something like that is reported, it's frustrating because you see they'll say like, oh, some fans did XYZ, which is toxic. And then a fan who I have never seen do that will start yelling at them like, how dare you call us toxic? Standing right next to the person who does do that, yelling, how dare you call us toxic? And it's like,
right,
they are the reason that she is calling you that. Like that, like it's wrong for the article to not have more nuance there or to paint with such a broad brush. So I like, that's not saying like, ignore that or dismiss that or whatever. Like it's hard when you're writing a lot of words to not, you're either too general or you're too specific, and it's but like it's easy to get lost in the weeds, and you got to stay to the point. And sometimes that point means generalizing, not defending it. I'm just saying possibly why that came about. But the question is not like, are they fabricate? Like, no, they've had these experiences. They are not making up the fact that toxic things have happened. I don't even think. Even people who, like I've said, are toxic in the past are like, there is no toxicity. You're the toxic one. I'm like, okay, so I don't agree with that, but like, we are in agreement though that there is toxicity, right? Like you,
right.
And so, be mad that there are people out there behaving in a way that are giving you a bad name, or try to not, you don't have to identify as part of their group. You got to communicate to people that like, obviously there's not an image that there's all these different like groups or there. Snyder fans very much give the perception of this unified group because they kind of act in coordinated or seemingly coordinated ways a lot of times.
Well, look, we've been told like I mean, come on, how coordinated has it been, dude? We've seen the campaigns. When I read the article and it was like, where's the GoFundMe stuff? Where's the campaigns and everything? It's like, have you not been around? Like, are you just really not paying attention? Because like I get DMs all the time of like, hey, on this day we're all going to tweet this thing, right? Like, Cavill is my Superman, or restore the Snyderverse, or release the Snyder cut, whatever, man. And I've been getting those DMs for years now. And it's like on this time, and it's literally coordinated where it's like, hey, at 2:14 your time, right? Because 2:14, right? 2:14 is the number, right? So I remember like, every February, it's like now for the last 3 years, it's like 3 or 4 years, whatever. It's been like on 2:14 at 2:14 PM or 2:14 AM your time, tweet this, right? And so like you literally have people doing it every hour from all these different time zones to make sure that they get this in. It's like that. We did a stream where we had both Ray Porter and Ray Fisher on, and we raised, almost $1,300. We raised $1,300 for AFSP, right? Like how many coordinated shows, streams and things happen. Even the dreaded and horrible stream that happened with Geeks and Gamers that raised 65 grand or whatever it was, before all that went to hell. Like these things were out there. There were people supporting these things. I mean, that's $65,000 that was on that Geeks and Gamers stream, no matter what you think of Geeks and Gamers, and I have my own opinions. But I mean, like that wasn't bots. That wasn't, just random stuff. It wasn't like somebody was out here like padding it, and saying, "Oh, I'll give some money here." I mean, you could say that maybe if you made like, $100, $500 or something like that. But that's a large sum of money. So I mean, there's people out here who are supporting this idea.
If you get bit enough times by a German Shepherd, you're going to start being prejudiced against German Shepherds.
Yeah.
And that's not representative, but you've had bad experiences, and it's hard to not form that opinion.
That's
now,
a good point.
if it's 5 times, is that enough to judge all German Shepherds by? Is that and it's a small sample, and there could all be really specific circumstances about that. Where were those stray dogs? Were they rescues who you don't know about what their past is, or what like, but you don't know any of that. All you know is it was a German Shepherd and it bit me. And so in the same way, like you run into 5 people who've got hashtag release a Snyder cut in their bio who all say, something rude or mean or cruel to you or whatever.
Right.
You now look at your mentions. When someone tags you or says something to you on Twitter, it shows up in your mentions. What do you see? Name,
Snyder,
Snyder, picture of Snyder, picture of Affleck, picture of Cavill,
Yep.
picture of Joker, like whatever. It's all
Yeah.
Snyder branded to hell. You click on their profile, associate producer, like it is
Right,
a
right.
branded, it is a flag waving Snyder fan, and they're saying like, oh well, you're a moron because you whatever. It doesn't have to happen that many times for you to have a perception, conscious or subconscious bias that, oh, this is how Snyder fans behave, and you have to untrain yourself from that.
And
because
can we be honest
it's really
that-
easy to assume like, well, there was a group of them doing this, and so
Yeah.
therefore it's not unreasonable for me to assume if they don't all do that, they are okay with it because they didn't stop it from happening.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Well, and Steven, here's the thing, man. Like, can we just be honest that we're dealing with the internet, right? So, like, we always think, like, you and I are having, me and William and Scotty tonight. Like, by the way, Scotty texted me and he goes, man, I've never gotten a chance to talk to Steven, man. That he really likes you. And I was so glad to get you two together because like you two like can like just really analyze and get to the meat of stuff. And I love that conversation. That's why I wanted to do that tonight. I didn't want to just have like the regular panel discussion. This is no offense to anybody else who usually appears on the channel, but I wanted to really dig into like, I didn't want us to get off on, well, this is what I like, or this is what my opinion is or whatever, but like, here's the facts, here's what's going on. But like we were just talking about, like, here's the thing. I look at some of those people who have those, they got their social media and they got, and you and I are talking and I can see that we're having an intelligent discussion tonight. Right. And we're able to put aside our differences, but something Scotty's told me many times, and I'm still learning this, right? It's still hard for me, is I take people at face value, right? So somebody will DM me and they're like, hey, Enosh, why did you say this? Or you did this? And I will try to reason with people, but I don't know who those people really are. online. The people hide behind an avatar or a like you said, like this whole thing. There's people out there, man, who use that associate producer thing. They don't understand what Zack meant by associate producer. There are honestly people that I have seen who have taken that so far and acted like that's like it's a real physical thing, like it means something in the real world, right? Like I don't know. I heard a couple of reports of like people like actually trying to put that on a resume or whatever. Like it cracked me up because when I worked at the last church that I worked at, when I went to the board when they were deciding whether or not to bring me on or not, I sat in for the board and they're like, they literally asked me, so because they saw my song, associate producer. Right. And obviously that was something that Zack said, right? He's like, you guys all support it. So I consider you guys my associate producers. Well, what does that mean? None of us were on set. None of us were coming and looking at dailies. None of us were giving our opinions on like what those things were. So like we were not physical associate producers on the film. That was an honorary thing that Zack was just like, hey, I love you guys. I appreciate my fans. I appreciate the people who made this happen. This is what I'm going to do. So like I made that song and then literally I had a board member at that church ask me, so you were an associate producer on a Hollywood film? And I was like, what? And they're like, well, we saw this thing online about like says Enosh, associate producer for Justice League. And I'm like, I had to explain to them that no, I'm not a real associate producer on it. I wrote a song that was fun and it was tongue in cheek with what was said. But yeah, I mean, people, they haven't always dealt with that well. And then like some of these are kids, right? Like I had to start realizing like you start having these discussions and it turns into an argument and you're sitting there on Twitter going back and forth with someone. And then you realize, oh my God, this is a 14-year-old. I wouldn't give this much time to any other 14-year-old sitting out here like who just has an opinion. And that's no knock against 14-year-olds, but you only know what you know. You know what I mean? You only know what you know. And I'm a grown man, and it's like some of these people online, they don't understand the nuances of life. They don't understand the nuances of what is real, what is Hollywood, and they go off on these tangents. And not everybody, you can't, you come into a situation genuine, but like Scotty's told me many times, Enosh, you sometimes take people all at face value, and you got to understand that the internet is not that. The internet, you cannot take things at face value. So when I see people talking about bots, is there a possibility of that? Yeah. Right? Like when I saw this, like I saw like gotcha things like, ooh, look there. See, there was bots, there was this, there was that. And I was just like, well, okay. It doesn't change how I felt.
It trended over 1 million tweets in November 2019. Anyone who knows anything about the internet would say like that's going to be a high percentage of bots. That not a high percentage like a high total percentage, but like a higher than normal percentage because that's what they gravitate towards. And this isn't the same kind of bots, but I mean like 40% of the internet traffic is bots. And that's not all like engagement. That's, search engine crawlers and other sort of automated stuff engaging. Yeah. They're not all posing as people. But
Rolling Stone has bots. They had tons of bots.
Right.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And just because there's a bot also doesn't mean that it's something that is, everyone go find a fake follower analysis and run it on your own Twitter account.
Right.
You almost guarantee you've got like more than 10%. On
TikTok, apparently there's like a whole demographic, Stephen, of young women from all over the world who find me interesting and they find my channel interesting and they want to be my friend.
Are you saying these people on Vero who are like
those are bots
with like
no they're real women they're like, real women, William.
I'm just looking for friendship and maybe more, like that's not a real I shouldn't be sending them my social security number.
Probably not
Nigerian Prince. The Nigerian Prince is one of my bots too. He's got $1 million.
Hey William, let me ask you about this because I think you have this. I get this, and I think this is where some of the backlash to some of this happens is these people who are, like Zeno said here, these move on crowds that just insult us. They can't handle that you just like it. right, William? They don't like your opinions, William. They don't like that you have an idea. Like how much flack did we take just a few months ago, William, saying, "Hey, if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't." But like we see a way that it could happen, right? And it was immediately like, no, 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 and you get attacked for that, and they're just like, move on, just let it go. I mean, how many times have we seen in our own chat here? You know, we're doing a show, we're just talking about stuff. Yeah, we're just having fun talking about stuff, and there's people just like, it's not gonna happen. It's not, you know. Again, I can't take those things at face value.
Yeah, me not being able to move on is not that person's problem. They've made it their problem. If I want to be obsessed about this mouse here on this pad, that's me. It's it's a dominating thing. It's the winning over and the defeating someone. Primal aspect of it is that if I give this up, that makes that person who's telling me to give it up better. If it doesn't, if Lewis, I could have a room covered with Zack Snyder stuff right now. How does that bother you? How does that influence you? You don't have to watch it.
Right.
It's like Star Trek. There's plenty of stuff that I don't watch that I don't like, but there's plenty of it I do watch. I don't go after the people who watch Lower Decks. And the fact that they love it, the Orville. I mean, we joke about the Orville, but the fact that people love that show, I'm not going to come out and destroy you for liking that show, and I'm not going to make it my life move on from the Orville. Season 3 is horrible. They've taken it upon themselves, and to me, that's the problem. Not the person who wants something and continues to hold out hope or something. It's the person who is obsessed with telling that person to move on, and then groups that person with every other fanatic. I'm just a guy. Listen, if there's something to consume, I pay for it. I buy it. I contribute. If there's a campaign, I join it. I don't, like I said, I don't do any of this crazy stuff. But why does me moving on or not moving on enrich your day in any way, shape, or form? That's a self-examination thing.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, and that's something that is just a weird thing too, because like even though I'd love to see more, but like I'm not like campaigning for it unless it's like an opportunity comes up. I mean, my piece today, I say that the SnyderVerse has demand, but even that's not the point of that. Isn't to say restore the SnyderVerse. It's just to say they created a problem for themselves by the way they handled this every step of the way. Not just like arguably, I'm not making this point, but like you could say that if they didn't plan on restoring it, then they shouldn't have even greenlit the Snyder Cut. Maybe I don't know if that. I don't agree with that, but like there's been mistakes made the entire way, and the fact of the matter is that there was very real engagement during the campaigns. There was very real engagement in viewership and downloads and other demand metrics when it went on HBO Max. And I'll publish something like that doesn't even say anything about restoring the Snyderverse. It just says WB's got a problem. And I get people responding to me like, "Oh, cry harder, Snyder fan. They're not going to restore it." And what am I supposed to do with that? Like, okay, fine. I don't like.
I mean, we're at the Berlin Wall. Neither one of us are jumping over right now. Nobody has the home run information to say this is going to happen definitely one way or another. And a lot of these guys, and we take some of these executives, especially the good ones, for fools in the fact that it's not just. Some of these guys who are telling you are never going to happen are looking at raw numbers as they can comprehend them. But when you're doing a streaming service, the number one thing for other than growth, I think growth is secondary, retention, because you can only grow so much. There are only so many people in the world that can buy these subscription services and all that. So once you get to that saturation point, it's retention. It's retention and guaranteed income. Now, if I entered your domain through the SnyderVerse or through Zack Snyder's Justice League, that's just how I got in. I'm just going to stand at the doorway. I'm looking around the house. What else am I watching? I have, prior to HBO Max, had absolutely no use for DC animation. But I've watched more of it now because it's there. So they're looking at associated content. They're looking at how many minutes would it come in. A household. Hey, I got a wife and 3 kids. Now, they're not watching the Snyderverse, but I'm paying for the account. Would they be watching My Little Pony or whatever else is on there if it weren't my account? So the anchor guy is a Snyder guy. So when you put all those analytics together, it refutes all this other stuff that a lot of people say. All I'm saying is that there is a business path. It can never happen, but there is a logical common sense. There is more of a logical common sense business pathway to getting this achieved than there are for the people who say it's never going to happen. The people who say it's never going to happen, for the most part, have their opinions based on a lot of hot air. And I'm not making fun of anybody, but it's they hear this or they think this or it's never going to happen. This is never going to happen. First of all, people with a brain in their between their ears never say never when it comes to this stuff, because we were saying never about the Snyder Cut to begin with. We were saying never about a whole lot of stuff. And people who say never end up making themselves look stupid. So to say that there's never going to be a continuation, we don't know what the data guy at HBO Max, the brand new guy who is looking at right now. And all this stuff about the article, if I'm an exec sitting in the corner office, there are people like, oh, well, all this, the execs are never going to, it's too much of this. No, they're not. You know what execs like? Money. And you know what brings money? Numbers. And if the analytics say one thing, money talks, louder than BS and whining. And we're talking about a streaming service that they're trying to get up to the point where it's drawing $1 billion a month. So and in the reboot, I just need to reboot. I'm like, oh, dude, I just need to take a plunger and just place on somebody's face and pull it out, because reboot is expensive and they don't have the credibility. And if they were any other organization, they don't have the credibility to reboot now. What they need to do is take what has been seen and what is out there and do the best that they can with that. Rebooting is telling your customer, you know what, I've wasted your time for the last 9 years. Let me try to waste it again, and let me see if you fall for it a second time. So they really need to take a look at these numbers. And the people who say that's never going to happen need to wait for those numbers to come out. And like I said, your opinion that it's never going to happen is one thing, but to destroy somebody and call somebody names because they have a business belief that it could happen is kind of absurd.
Well, I would just say this about this comment. So Zack's movies all made money, and those early DC movies actually made more money than the early Marvel movies. The only difference is we put this label on it that it's Superman, so it should make $1 billion right out the gate. Right. And that doesn't make any sense when literally the last time we saw Superman was 2006's Superman Returns, which was very mediocrely, it was very mediocre. It was not received. I know there's people who love that film. There's parts of that film that I absolutely adore, but it was not met with some great success. Right. So it's not like we had an amazing, Superman franchise that was there, or established or anything. It was literally still trying to go off the heels of the Christopher Reeve movies, which ended with a fizzle. Just more like instead of a firecracker, it was more like an ash snake, just kind of like fizzled out. School. Right. And so like it just kind of fizzled out. So like Superman did not have that brand name. I know we all want to look, I love Superman, man. Superman's my thing, but I'm also not naive enough to say, well, everybody loves Superman. There's a lot of people who look at Superman as boring. There's people who don't know Superman's backstory or haven't read a Superman comic book, and since Superman was moving planets or doing crazy stuff, like that. That's like that. So the thing is no, that movie was not going to make $1 billion. BVS, I hear you, RJ. Here's the thing. BVS had a point, but Marvel WB, did their thing with it and whatnot, but it still made money. I just don't understand this concept of you just can't like what you like, and I can't like what I like, and somehow we're bad. And I look at even this article that's like okay, so if Zack reacted to people or whatever, first of all, it seems so weird with the comment that they said, like Zack said, like, I will destroy them on social media. Like, who even freaking talks that way? But I was just going to say, like, so everybody has a bad day with somebody, right? Or a bad day, something, or like obviously there was a lot of tension around the Snyder Cut, with Zack and the studio and whether or not it was going to happen and how it was going to happen and what was going to be allowed and what was not going to be allowed. And my thing is, you know what? I met LeVar Burton. LeVar Burton is very beloved by so many people because of his work with literacy and Reading Rainbow and whatnot. I had a bad experience with LeVar Burton. He brushed us off. He acted like we didn't exist. We waited a half an hour for him. We tried to engage with him, and I don't know what was going on, but the thing is, you don't know when you meet somebody and having a bad day or whatever. I to hear like, oh, Zack Snyder said, you know, I'm going to destroy them on social media. That seems weird to me. That seems like the hyperbole of, oh, he's a Lex Luthor, just, you know, he's going to destroy these guys, whatever. But even if Zack was upset with them and like took, you know, took issues, whatever, and they're like, oh, well, he filmed all this stuff without their permission. Okay, but they didn't have to put it in the film either. You know what I mean? Like, I can go film whatever the heck I want to go film, but like, you know, some stuff got in the movie and some stuff didn't get in the movie. You know, but like the Green Lantern situation, when it comes to Wayne T. Carr and I see people attacking Wayne T. Carr for no good reason other than to make themselves look like they're smart about something. Well, Wayne T. Carr wasn't he's a 2-bit actor and he was just, you know, a placeholder or whatever. Like, okay, that's your opinion, man. Like, I feel like we go back to the what's that movie? The Big Lebowski, right? Like, well, yeah, man, that's like your opinion, whatever. But like, Zack filmed stuff. He wanted the stuff in there. Like, Zack's not gonna like hype all that stuff up to just be like, yeah, you know, like it actually sucked, but you know, I'm gonna hype it up like it's a thing. He filmed what he wanted to film. However he filmed it, and the studio fought him tooth and nail on everything, you know, even getting his vision out there. They wanted him to compromise on that. Even they wanted him to compromise on certain things and certain aspects of the film. So
can I highlight something real quick? That's
yeah.
Cool. All right, so RJ, I love you, man, and you bring up this 70% second week drop over and over again. But here's the thing: when it comes to that drop, there's a bunch of stuff people got to understand. A, the majority of people who go see DC films see front load; they see them in the first week anyway. But two, there was this particular situation that makes that 870 million near that BVS made and what Man of Steel made with his 670 million uniquely better than a lot of situations. Is going into the situation, unlike Marvel, you have to wrest the legacy of these characters and what people believe these characters are from their cold, dead hands in some cases to carry them on to something else. And that is what Superman is up against, and that is what Batman is up against. Everybody, my grandfather had a Batman, you know, and when we promoted each and every one of these movies. Man of Steel, BVS, and when we did our surveys, most of the people could not grab onto that Superman initially. Now, the same people, and ironically, the same people that we had, because I kept close association with some of these people when we did Zack Snyder's Justice League here, a lot of those people had time to appreciate those characters. And what the company needed to understand before coming out with a whimsical $1 billion expectation is that they needed that time. If they were going to build a foundation that was going to last 13, 14, 15 years and be able to be carried on to other groups of actors to do these things, they needed to take that time to cement that foundation. Even if it was just a 5 story arc that was going to move on. What the problem that they have right now is there's nothing to move on from. How are you going to sell people on your new thing when you never finished your old thing? So when you have Superman, who's been around 80 years, you're fighting an uphill battle just to break through, but you can do it because living proof is the same people that we promoted Man of Steel with in 2013. When they came back 8-9 years later and we're doing these other movies, they are more endeared to the character. It's not like Iron Man when you've never had a live action Iron Man on the motion picture.
Yeah.
So
no, exactly.
They needed to understand, the business people needed to understand that, you know, what they did was extraordinary and built from then. That's not the fans' fault that they screwed that up. And the 70% drop, you still made 870 million. 870 million is 870 million. That means not only did you have front-loaded money, you still had enough staying power over the time of that movie was done to be able to make that kind of money for an IP that, 8-9 years or 7 years prior, you barely drew 700 million with. So I don't think that people rejected it as much as it took time for people to actually become endeared to it.
Well, you know, and with this, like, okay, so comments like this, and absent good, I want you to know I'm not like, you know, like attacking you or anything like that. That's not what this is. Obviously, you know, my tone, I'm totally chill with this, but like a statement that says Green Lantern and Manhunter didn't need to be in the movie. Okay, but I don't see, like, if Zack wanted it in the movie, he wanted it in the movie. Look at the nightmare scene, right? It has Joker, it has Batman, it has, Cyborg, it has, Deathstroke, whatever. Like, they didn't have to be in the movie, right? But there's a lot of things that, like, we may have not put in the movie, but I liked seeing Manhunter. Now, listen, I'll be the first one to admit, I love the fact that Martian Manhunter is in the film. I feel like the CGI on Martian Manhunter is like the design of Martian Manhunter is a little off for me, but I like it. I still like it, right? But I mean, does it have to be that way? Maybe not. I don't know, man. But it's a Justice League movie, so, like, I'm not mad at it, and I think that it's fine,
Well,
but it's not about what I wanted. It's not called Enosh Fee's Justice League, right? It's Zack Snyder's Justice League, and then the comment also here, who was it who said? I think Zack said that Zack said that Warner Brothers wanted to release his film as is and unfinished. Can you imagine the tension that must have been there when, after all of this, after all the campaign, after everything, like wherever you want to look at it, Zack walks in and they're like, "Hey, we just want to release your film unfinished. Just bring us the unfinished footage, and we're just going to release that. No additional nothing, no whatever." Come on. Really? That's asinine. That's stupid. That's like doing nothing. That, you're just going to put out some, nothing burger,
And I see a lot of people also talk about the budget for completing the Snyder Cut, and it's very frequent that that number is added to the Justice League 2017 budget. So they'll say, like, oh, it was 350 or 450, whatever, $1 million spent on the movie at that point. And I understand why that's a temptation to do and why that seems like a logical thing to do, but it's really important to understand that that is not the way Warner Brothers was treating it or looking at it. Getting that kind of extra funding for the movie does not mean that it needs to recoup the losses of Justice League at the box office and make its own money back. For all intents and, like, this is a new product comprised using scraps of an old product.
Right.
Or really, I mean,
Yeah.
it's using the actual original product. But,
I know, it's so weird. It's unprecedented.
But the way it is, like, in the accounting and Warner Brothers books, and the way that they treated it when they greenlit it, and the way that they would look at it upon releasing it, this is a $100 million movie. Zack Snyder's Justice League is a $100 million movie. Justice League's budget was to create all of this, and then they discarded a whole bunch of it, and then it underperformed in the theater, and then they closed the books on Justice League. Justice League as a business entity was done. They got all the tax write-offs, they got all the accounting write-offs are all taken off the books. It's done. Then they say, here's a new movie we're going to do. We're going to spend $100 million on it, and 99% of it is going to be archived footage that we have from another project. And we're going to use it here. And so that's another thing to consider in the performance also, that if you're comparing it against a $200 million movie, it legitimately cost half as much as that. So this isn't to be like, oh, actually the budget's low and therefore that automatically makes it a success. But the point is, it's just not I guess I have to head out, but I do have one more point I think that kind of spins off of this that hits on a lot of kind of what we've been talking about. I talk a lot about kind of being humbled by realizing how wrong I was with my approach to analyzing a lot of this stuff in the earlier days when I was writing prior to the release of Justice League, and a lot of that informed how I kind of changed my approach and learned new information, as well as kind of gathered additional stuff. And one of the things that I learned talking to somebody who has worked on some of these films, has some experience in the industry, I was asking them, I was learning about the movie from them, but I had put this idea together in my head where I was like, oh, look, if this happens and then that happens and then this other thing happens, those are all proof of such and such. And you would think, I think it makes sense that if all of those stars align, that would convince them to release it. And it was like one of the most embarrassing moments not like embarrassed. Like I wasn't. They were polite about it, but the response was they kind of inhaled and were like, "Well, that's all very logical. What you need to understand is that people are not making these decisions. The people that are making these decisions are not using logic always to make them. And that doesn't mean that they're always bad decisions, that they're always good decisions. It just means that it's very, 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 very easy as somebody sitting on your couch at home to get on Box Office Mojo and be like, oh, BVS dropped 70% second. Sorry, I'm not picking out anybody's particular argument.
Yeah, pick on argument. Get him. I'm just kidding.
But it's really easy to jump on that or to jump on Man of Steel's total box office versus something else, or BVS should have been. It's really, really, really easy to grab onto that and be like, they will never, they shouldn't ever, whatever. I wouldn't ever if I were them. And all the time, movies that lose money get sequels, and movies that make money don't get sequels. Six Underground is one of the biggest, the most viewed movies ever on Netflix. And they're like, yeah, no, we don't want another one. Well, meanwhile, stuff bombs all the time, and someone at the studio, they'll believe in the filmmaker to have a chance at another one, or they'll see something that's like, oh, if we just change this, it'll work the second time, or you know what, maybe they've got enough, like somebody owes them a favor, and they can get a good deal on the actor, and they already own the rights to the script, and they've like, there's all sorts of not financial reasons or financial reasons that we don't understand, or just totally personal opinions of the people who signed the checks that we don't understand.
Here's a prime example of one right here. Shazam only made barely broke 400 million. It's getting a sequel, and there's no indication, as much as I love Shazam, that it's going to break more than maybe 600 million, but they're spending a little bit more on it. I'm glad it's getting a sequel, but if they would have used the same logic for BVS and going into Justice League and going into anything SnyderVerse, that logic, I don't get a Shazam 2, and I might not even get a Black Adam. So I'm happy that at least somebody at some point made a decision based on, let's keep this going forward, you know?
But it's not like they have a spreadsheet with the budget and the box office and compare it to another box office, and it runs it through a formula, and it's like, this gets greenlit and that doesn't, and then like, that's the decision.
Yeah.
There are so many other factors involved in this. Some logical, some business, some illogical, some personal. Sometimes there's a tax break that they can get if they start production right away on some random thing. And so they throw stuff in there, and so like that's even with the Snyder Cut. People would saying for years, "Oh, it's going to happen. I know it's going to happen." Well, the stars had to align to make it happen. It wasn't just one thing. It needed HBO Max to come along. It needed Snyder to be free and have the time to do it. It needed trend numbers to hit the right levels. It needed most of the movies that were, other than like Aquaman, like a number of failures and executive reshuffles and leadership changes and an acquisition by AT&T.
Right.
Like all of these things that we have no control over. Not only we don't have an influence on, but no ability to predict, all came together.
Thank you.
So now we're in that position. And this is not me saying that like the Snyderverse is going to happen or anything, but there's like, I learned my lesson the first time, and then I was lucky enough to be right about the Snyder Cut, but all along the way I wasn't ever, does this mean it's going to happen or not? It's always, does this make it more likely or less likely? But ultimately, even that, as I was like softly scolded by my friend, said, well, that's not really how it works. I understand that's how your brain works, and that's a logical explanation, but that's not, that logic is not what's going to determine whether or not this movie gets greenlit or not. And I thought it was a very logical, it was PR and box office driven. It was not like some random conspiracy theory. And it was like, oh yeah, you know what? You're right. I have no idea how this works, but it's really easy to kind of have an opinion, and then like an opinion in search of evidence. It's really hard to form a opinion based on the evidence instead of find evidence to verify an opinion. And it's just you're fighting yourself literally, because you're the only one in your head to stop yourself from confirmation bias. So it's just really hard to kind of think about things in that way. That's not to say that everyone saying it's not going to be restored is wrong, or that people say that it is going to be restored or wrong. It's to say like, none of you know. And that's not an insult. It's just we don't know. And I will say, like, there were some interesting things in this article, like the fact that report was commissioned after the Snyder Cut came out, or the fact that somebody seems to be concerned about the fact that it's being released on digital. Does that mean anything? I don't know. And that's not to, I hate raising hopes and giving out speculation, because all signs say Zack is doing great at Netflix, and who would want him to work somewhere where this type of article is liable to come out like against him all the way along? I mean, because this type of thing is not new. This has been happening since like before Batman v Superman came out. Articles like this, social media stuff going on that's like this. I mean, who wants to work on that? And so I'm not arguing on any one way or the other. Just saying, like, it's really easy to be convinced that we know how these things can or should go, when none of the decision making or dominoes that fall are things that we can. Who would have known that AT&T was going to come along, and then they were going to launch a streaming service, and then right before the streaming service launched, fans were going to hit 1 million tweets right at that moment, and like it's all out there, and just like what you like and support what you want to see, and don't be toxic. And the guys that write the checks are going to write the checks how they want to write the checks. Right.
And speaking of writing checks, I have to bring this up here. Daniel Martin is the newest member here of the channel, of the Poindexter Lounge. Thank you so much, Daniel, for putting your faith in us and joining the channel. It means a lot. And you know what? When somebody joins the channel, they get something special, don't they, William?
Ah, damn it! I don't have my belt. But yeah, go ahead.
You don't have the belt. Well, okay, but hey.
Well, hold on, wait. We'll do this.
What's it? No avatar? Is that what we're doing?
Oh man!
What was that? What was that? It was like no avatar all of a sudden. Like, yeah, we'll do this. Stuck. Sure, okay. We can do that. That's if that's what you want to do.
Poindexter Lounge.
But hey, no, Daniel. When you join the lounge, you get the woo. So hey, we all get excited and we give you a woo.
Showtime! Woo! 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 Silent and profiling. Woo! It's live and in color.
So thank you so much, Daniel. I appreciate the trust that you put in us. And says Enosh has provided much entertainment on many a late night. So hey, that's what we're here for, to have fun. I do want to make an announcement. We're going to be bringing it in. I know Steven's got to go, and we've been going for 3 hours 16 minutes.
Go.
So the nerd, what was that? What'd you get?
I fixed the avatar.
Oh, you fixed it. Oh, there you go. Okay. But we, so the Nerd Queens were supposed to be here tonight. They got hung up on something. So we're going to do a stream tomorrow night with the Nerd Queens, and probably talk a little bit more about like the interpersonal things with like, about Zack, right? You know, and like their relationship with Zack, you know, how they
Lex.
see Zack.
You mean Lex? Lex Luthor?
Lex. Yes, Lex.
I'm sorry. That part made me chuckle. Outside of all the other stuff, that was like the embodiment of, I've never seen anything from the guy that would have, I mean, as he's sitting with these diabolical fingers, like the guy from Despicable Me, planning out his next flight. I'm like, what the fuck?
Is okay? Can I just say something about Todd? I don't know who I didn't see tonight. I have seen in the past. Like, guys, you know, Todd, listen, man, you're all good, bro. You're all good. And I don't say that just because you give super chats, but like, people give Todd a hard time because he's a big Marvel fan and stuff like that, you know, and he comes in, you know, he talks about how Marvel is the gold standard.
I mean, it's
whatever.
fun.
I mean, look, Marvel's doing their thing. Like, and I'll stand up for Todd all day long, man. Like, you know, people are giving Todd such a hard time. Stop giving Todd a hard time. I swear, if I see anybody giving Todd a hard time, I'm gonna mute you. I'll just tell you, Todd, I got your back, bro. You and me, man. I got your back. And
stop taking this so seriously.
I know, man. Like, you know, like seriously. But like, yeah, you know, like we just, I look, I enjoy Todd's list too. Todd brings a lot of joy to me. If you're saying that I bring a lot of entertainment, then I Todd, you bring a lot of joy to me, and a smile to my face when he has me read stuff like, that Zack Snyder should go to Marvel or something like that in a super chat. That makes me, makes me laugh. People need to, if you're taking that too seriously, I don't know what to tell you. Integrity here says, if I'm still banging pots and pans in the chat about SnyderVerse next year, I'm going to make t-shirts to say I had a heart attack on the Poindexter Lounge.
And all I got was this t-shirt.
So tomorrow night, though, we are going to have the Nerd Queens tomorrow night. So I think we had a really great discussion tonight. We covered a lot of the seriousness of this. I tagged Steven's article is a pinned comment. So if you have not read Steven's article on Screen Rant, please go over there, check his article out, read that, support Steven and what he's doing, because he's really good at what he does. And I always love having Steven on. I love being on the Vodka stream and having these conversations with Steven, because there are very few people that intellectually, I think, can break things down and really explain a point like Steven. And also, like, it was really great having Scotty on, because Scotty's that way too, like, where it's just like, hey,
whoever has
don't have time for this
whoever missed the
BS,
beginning, make sure you go back and check out his part on that, because that was,
yeah,
I don't know, as someone who is like highly pedantic and contextual about information, was very, very interesting to me to get to see it broken down from someone who's as familiar with it as he is. So that was great.
Heck yeah. So thanks, William, for coming in, and so, hey, listen, I think we just end this with just saying, if you loved Zack Snyder's stuff, great. If you supported it, you're not a bot. You know who you are. I'm not a bot. Maybe I am a bot. I don't know. Maybe I was built in a lab somewhere. I don't know. Maybe I was built in we're all T1000s, right? Just waiting to be, initiated or whatever. I don't know. It's all simulation anyways, right? I mean, like, I literally had I had the Illuminati apparently courting me, so I don't know. Steven, did I tell you about this? No. I got a DM on Facebook, of all places, from somebody asking me to join the Illuminati. Right? And like, okay. Yeah, and like, it was very, very strange, and I just wanted to see where
I hear that's how they normally do their recruitment too.
Is that how they do it? Is that how they do it? Like, it literally it said, "Greetings, welcome to the Illuminati world, bringing the poor, the needy, and the talented to the limelight of fame and riches, fame, power, and security. Get recognized in business and politics, rise to the top in whatever you do, and be protected spiritually and physically. All these you will achieve in the twinkling of an eye when you are initiated into the great Illuminati empire."
Yeah, that's legit. Did they include the triangle? Or
yes. It's,
okay. That's how you know.
It's got the triangle and the all-seeing eye, and then they literally asked me, "Is this offer accepted or declined?" And so, like, I answered, "What now?" I didn't hear anything back, and so, like, and then they answered me back, and they, like, after a few weeks, and they're like, "Do you accept or decline?" And I was like, I messaged my people. I'm like, I just got to see where this is going. So I hit accept. And they said, okay, nice choice. How old are you and where are you from? And then they're like, okay, I got to link you with the Grand Master of the Great Illuminati Brotherhood, who's going to tell you more about the Illuminati Brotherhood and how to join. Shall we? So I have no idea.
Depressing me, because the fact
that
this is being,
if I disappear, dude, there's something like way up. Like, maybe I'm not supposed to talk about it. They didn't tell me I'm not supposed to talk about it. So maybe
set things up for me to just take over when you disappear, because I got a feeling you're just going to be like missing
stuff like that.
I think there needs to be a Poindexter Lounge, even if you're in a box somewhere.
Stuff like that is a little bit depressing, because the fact that it's being used suggests that there's at least a marginal success rate. Right. That they so they're like, oh, do the Illuminati one. That would work last time. Like, who? Oh, dude.
They haven't asked for any money yet, though. So,
told you the Nigerian prince is next. They're once the Illuminati strikes out, the Nigerian prince gets that same number, and he says, "You try it."
If you ever look at one of those threads where someone like runs through the whole gamut with the scammers, it's impressive sometimes how long they'll keep you on a string before they're like, oh, okay, and now we need a check.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I've seen them
Routing
spend like
number. Routing number is my
days
favorite
going
guy.
back and forth between people before they even approach the like, okay, now you owe us money. And it's like,
Right.
wow, what kind of scammer's got that much time to like?
I have
go
messed
through a
with I have
whole-
messed with scammers and telemarketers my whole life, man. Just mess with them, like asking them questions, and like I convinced one scammer that I was actually from India and my brother had died by a cobra bite, and we moved to America and we moved to Arizona, and my sister was also killed by a rattlesnake, and like. But they just keep going, and they're just like, but would you like this credit card? No, I don't. My favorite one is when they used to tell me that there's no annual fee on the credit card, and I would say, well, but I'm annual fee, and they're like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, my name is annual fee, and they'd be like, well, okay, and I'm like, so why can't I have this credit card? And they're like, well, you can have this credit card. And I'm like, well, you just told me there's no annual fee, and yeah, that's a great thing of having my last name. So there
That's
you go.
awesome.
There you go. All right, guys. Well, hey, thanks everybody for being here tonight. I appreciate all of you. Please make sure that on your way out you hit that like button and do the thing. If you haven't subscribed already, hey, why don't you think about subscribing to the channel? We try to have some good conversations. And I hope that even if you disagree with me or you disagree with Steven or Scotty or William, nah, but but I do hope that that if you do, that you see that we try to have a legitimate conversation about these things, that we're not just on some fringe thing where it's like we're just right and everybody else is wrong and we're not willing to have a conversation about this. We're trying to look at all these things, whether it be this topic or, like I said, Steven and I have been on streams talking about Ezra Miller or whatever. Like, all we're trying to do is get to the bottom of these things and actually take a realistic approach. And I know that that's something kind of novel for the internet or for YouTube or Twitter or whatever, but you know what? That's what we're trying to do. So in light of that, I think that there would probably be no other way than to end this show than some self-promotion and bringing back something that has been out there for a while and that people can critique, love, hate, or whatever. But yeah, we're all associate producers, and so I'll play my song as our outro tonight. Thank you guys for being here. Appreciate you all. Make sure to go support William over at Sci-Fi Center and check out his shows on Friday nights. At what time are you going now? Was it 9:30 p.m. Eastern for Sci-Fi Center Presents, and he's got some other things he's working on. We got some more shows we're bringing to the Poindexter Pantheon, and then of course this guy Stephen Colbert, great guy, very very smart. Tell Amanda we said hi and the kids.
Will do.
We love you guys, and yeah. With that being said, this is how I felt about the whole thing. So have a good night, everybody.
Oh my goodness! Welcome to the Poindexter Lounge. This is Enosh. It's happening. It's coming. 2021. Zack Snyder just announced on the live stream on Vero that Zack, I can barely talk. Zack Snyder's Justice League is real. It's coming 2021. Look, even the dog's excited. Harley Quinn's excited, aren't you, Harley? Yes, you are. It's tangible. It is coming. It is there. I'm at a loss. Oh my gosh, I am like losing my mind.
Will you release the Snyder Cut?
Like I told you, I have it. So it's just a question of like, we got to find the way to show it someday. Yes.
I reckon you should show it.
What's that?
I reckon you should show it.
Why do you think I should just show it?
Yeah, I think we should.
I reckon
Well,
you should.
No disagreement here.
I think that, I mean, I don't have like, I can't show the movie right now.
I mean, there is this. I have this. I don't know if this is helpful.
That's division.
See that?
Hey, Sean Combs, you know that hot new sound you were looking for? Well, listen to this.
Hey, did you hear? Zack is back, he was attacked, took the flak, and got the sack. Back on track, he got the final laugh, and man, he got his freaking movie back. All the fans came together for something pure, confident and sure we did endure. Spread the word to find the cure, save lives is for the ultimate Zack return. They said that it was just a fantasy, but we believed because we knew that it would be the greatest comeback in history. Hitting hard like a kick to the gut, it's a Snyder cut.
If you seek his monument, look around you.
For the unity.
Associate producer for the true Zack Snyder's Justice League. Ignoring all the haters cause their ignorance just empowers me. They just go on making noise, but very soon their mouths will shut. Us united, we stand strong, supporters of the Snyder Cut.
Yeah, you already know. Accountability is great entertainment. For sure it is. Poindexter Lounge, I see you out there playing. I see you. Keep up the good work. Keep doing what you do.
Poindexter, and I'm a nerd for sure. I hit to the core and make them soar. I slam the door on all the ones there on the corner, even if it means fight Warner Brothers. Borg life is definition of the way I live every day, the price to pay. It wasn't yay we heard him say, deny it if you may, you know his name is Ray. I stay with Ray Fisher all day long, I stay strong and fight the wrong, headstrong. Cause in the end your cloud is gone. It wasn't your show Ray came on.
Let me just break it down for you like this. I can summarize everything up in simply 2 words. You lost.
I'm Enosh's grandmother, and I say yes, release the Snyder Cut.
Larry Bird, associate producer for the true Zack Snyder's Justice League. Ignoring all the haters cause their ignorance just empowers me. They just go on making noise, but very soon their mouths will shut. Us united, we stand strong, supporters of the Snyder Cut.
Warner Brothers won't release a cut of Justice League that never existed in the first place.
We're going to start with this, and hopefully this will be the last time ever that we talk about the Snyder Cut.
It is no joke. It is right on the money. It never existed. I'm glad we're getting this.
Thousands, hundreds of thousands of people who are demanding the Snyder Cut. It doesn't exist. It doesn't exist.
I know enough of what's going on behind the scenes to know that, guys, there's no Snyder Cut. It's impossible to put together.
There you go.
It just doesn't exist.
But why does anyone care about the Snyder Cut still? It's like, who cares? It's over.
I like wake the up. I like wake the up.
Yo, this song is fire.
A league of justice is what it's all about. We crush the doubt, we go all out with this doubt. We got a mission to carry out as we keep on shouting for a Snyder knockout. All the haters act like they never learn. They just get burned, they don't discern how much they really should be concerned, so they can all just carry this L they earn. People is what makes the movement grow. You know, you already know. So, to the ones that deny the cut, the show's starting, you can all shut up.
Poindexter Lounge. You already know.
Restore the SnyderVerse, restore the SnyderVerse, restore the SnyderVerse, restore. Associate producer for the true Zack Snyder's Justice League. Ignoring all the haters cause their ignorance just empowers me. They just go on making noise, but very soon their mouths will shut. Us united, we stand strong, supporters of the Snyder Cut. Associate producer for the true Zack Snyder's Justice League. Ignoring all the haters cause their ignorance just empowers me. They just go on making noise, but very soon their mouths will shut. Us united, we stand strong, supporters of the Snyder Cut.
Zack, thank you for all you have done, all you have given, and the inspiration you have become to so many within this movement. You have taught us that anything is possible. Always know that we stand with you and Deborah. For myself, everyone at the Poindexter Lounge, and all of your associate producers, we say, the Snyder Cut is upon us.
Good night, everybody. Stay nerdy. Restore the SnyderVerse.